Africa's Freedom Front Plus leader, Dr. Kone Mulder, who's saying their recent visit to the United States carried a message of hope. Speaking at a media briefing in Kempton Park following the party's 10-day trip, Mulder criticized President Cyril Ramaphosa's earlier state visit to the U.S. in May, accusing him and his delegation of acting prematurely in their efforts to mend ties with the Trump administration.
With regard to farms, farm murders, black and white, doesn't matter. With regard to workers in the rural areas, there's an insistence, a condition that the United States Trump administration wants the South African government to proclaim that as priority crimes immediately, and that it should be investigated, all incidents, by the Hawks or some institution on that level. That was the first one. The second one was that the ANC should publicly, unequivocally denounce kill the boer, kill the farmer. I specifically asked, are you talking about the government of national unity? What are you talking about? And the response was, we want the ANC as a political party to do that in public. Before we left, we said to each other, we should expect to be asked in the United States about genocide. Interesting enough, we were not asked that question. Nowhere, not once.
The African Development Bank has warned that rising geopolitical tensions, cuts in development aid and protectionist trade policies could slow economic growth in South Africa and across the continent. Unveiling the latest country focus report in Centurion, just north of Johannesburg, the bank highlighted South Africa's economic strengths but also urged caution. Economist Paul Mpuga has more.
Indeed, shocks and uncertainty have been part of the causes for low growth in South Africa. Not only South Africa, but the rest of the continent. And what we are seeing now, the geopolitical tensions, the escalating trade restrictions and tariffs, the cut in international aid, not only for South Africa, but for the rest of the continent and other developing countries, these impact the growth of our countries. However, we still have room for promoting intra-Africa trade, for reorganizing our economies, to promote domestic investment.
The World Bank has commended President Hakainde Hichilema's mining policies for revitalizing the sector and increasing mineral production in Zambia. World Bank country manager Dr. Achim Falk said the rise in copper and other mineral output last year, despite persistent energy shortages, reflects the positive impact of the government's approach. He made the remarks during a meeting with President Hichilema at State House.
Solid policies and engagement with key stakeholders, especially in the private sector, but also others around the world. You have been able to turn around the sectors. And I think the success last year, where you saw increase in copper production and overall minerals production, despite a very difficult year where you face significant energy shortages, I think shows the success. And I think when we talk to various stakeholders, including, of course, the private sector, very, very optimistic of where the sector is going. The reason why we're here today is to talk about local content, meaning how to improve the benefits for Zambians along the value chain.
A delegation from Namibia's Council of Traditional Leaders has wrapped up a visit to South Africa aimed at exploring self-reliance strategies, and this itinerary included a stop in the Bakhatlaba Khafela community in the Northwest Province, known for its innovative local development initiatives. Ombara Vezemburuka Kambe Serembi explains.
We did not only come to South Africa. 3 weeks back, we've been in Ghana, again in Uganda, and now we are in South Africa. As we are the same people, politicians are visiting each other frequently, and for us as traditional leaders, this is the first time. We came to meet our brothers and sisters in the traditional setup, to come and benchmark and learn from them, to see how they relate with their government, how they relate with the private sector, the business community, and also with their communities.
The United Nations is marking its 80th anniversary with a bold internal review aimed at improving how it works. Guy Ryder, the UN Under-Secretary General for Policy and Chair of the UN 80 Task Force, says the initiative will focus on reassessing thousands of mandates that shape the UN Secretariat's daily work.
This is the United Nations and the Secretary General responding to the totality of our circumstances. Our political circumstances, our financial circumstances certainly, but also I think circumstances in which the effectiveness of multilateralism is up for scrutiny. I don't think we should avert our eyes from any of those three dimensions of the circumstances that we face. And the idea is to bring the United Nations out of this process and these rather turbulent times in better shape, stronger, in a position to confront the challenges of today and tomorrow more effectively. And in the end, and this will be the measure of the success of the initiative.
And finally, US musician, rapper Sean Combs, known by stage name as Diddy, could still face up to 2 years in prison after a split jury verdict. Whilst he was acquitted on 3 major charges, he was found guilty on 2 others. Sharon Bryce-Peace picks up the story from us from New York.
Well, in a sense, despite those 2 guilty verdicts, this will be seen as somewhat of a victory here for Sean Diddy Combs because he escapes a possible life sentence on the racketeering conspiracy charge and the 15-year to life in prison possible penalties associated with the sex trafficking charges. So he has been found guilty on the 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution, which carry a maximum of 10 years in prison each. So a possible scenario here where he could still face up to 20 years in prison. And that might not sound like a win to many people, but in this instance, defense attorneys hugging each other, patting each other on the back. So there is some relief here.
And that's how we end Africa Roundup on Africa Rise and Shine for this Thursday, the 3rd of July. Coming up, we'll zoom into the Central African region of the continent, getting stories making headlines over there with our resident analyst. Today we speak to geopolitical analyst Aaron Ngambi, and Peter will be spearheading that chat. Stay with us.
Stella Longwe pamalonje
palitusokoma pano pamalonje kumvera nyimbo za mu Africa kusangalala kupeza moyo akuti kumva moyo kuti kuyenda bwino pano pamalonje ndiyetu apa tili ndikatswiri oyimba ameneyu ndikatswiri wa dziko la Malawi amene akukhala mdziko la South Africa ndipo amayimba amene akuti ndi Big Nick Malawi. Yatusati kuti kodi moyo wanu woyimba ukuyenda bwanji mu Johannesburg?
Moyo woyimba ukuyenda bwino kwambiri. Chiliyonse chikutheka ndithu bwino.
Ayi aziwoneka chiliyonse chikutheka mofa magrasi anu apa mwaka. Akuti kumenya yonse aziwoneka zoti azikutheka ndithu mu Johannesburg.
Malonje panthawi ya 6 koloko kufikira 7 koloko madzulo. Lowiruka ndi Stella Longwe.
New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Right, let's focus our attention on what's been happening in Central Africa. And from fragile ceasefires to billion-dollar infrastructure deals, Central Africa continues to be a region of shifting alliances and simmering tensions and strategic investments. In the DRC, a humanitarian aircraft has been shot down by rebels just days after a truce was signed between DRC and Rwanda. And the United States is negotiating a major mining deal with Kinshasa at this time. Chad's former prime minister has ended his hunger strike, and Cameroon sees a surprising presidential bid by one of Paul Biya's longtime allies. Well, let's try and unpack some of these stories and what they might mean. And joining us is geopolitical analyst Aaron Ngambi. Aaron, always good to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us on the program. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Peter, and good morning to our listeners this morning.
So let's begin in the DRC. Kinshasa says that the plane recently shot down by rebels was carrying humanitarian aid and this happened just days after a ceasefire deal was signed with Rwanda. What does this incident tell us about the fragility of that truce, and what's signed in Washington, does it translate into what's happening on the ground?
Yeah, that is where the concern is. That's the problem. The problem is that what you saw in Washington, D.C., parties to the conflict and parties that have signed an agreement that seem to be very vague. For example, in this truce between Rwanda and the DR Congo over that conflict, they do not even mention the aggressor. I think M23 is not even, rebels are not even in the picture here. That is a major problem. How do you solve a conflict without understanding its root cause and what the problems are and addressing those problems? So for lack of them trying to identify who the aggressor is in this conflict and addressing the issue head on, they've left a vacuum for vulnerability of this agreement.
Yeah, I mean, very quick thoughts on this, because there's so many mixed reactions about this peace deal or this agreement, inverted commas. Some see it as a breakthrough, others dismissing it just as window dressing. Very briefly, what's your assessment?
I think that it lacks all the credibility of a peace deal that will last. The reason for it is because even the breaker of this, the mediator of this deal, the United States, you look at what Trump said. Trump clearly said that he does not even understand the region. He does not even understand the conflict. He's not comfortable talking about the historical context and the issues between Rwanda and the Congo. And because of that, how do you expect the United States to broker a deal between the two? The interest of the United States in this deal is just the mineral rights in the Congo. Trump is very clear. He said this is what the U.S. will benefit from this, and not what the Congolese will benefit or the Rwandese will benefit, or what is the interest of the M23 rebels and how they can address that. This is the problem, and I think that this is why we're even seeing that a plane is shot down. The conflict is still kind of going, even though that there was agreement that was signed in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, and I think, as you said, in the end, it really is about the people on the ground, and often these deals, these mining deals in particular, often benefit the elites rather than ordinary citizens. All right, let's turn our attention to Chad, and former Prime Minister and opposition leader Sucé Masra has ended his hunger strike. What do you think prompted the strike? Can you remember? And what does this say about Chad's political climate just months after the contentious presidential elections?
Well, Sucé Masra is an interesting figure. Like you said, former prime minister, is an opposition leader now, and he's been incarcerated on political charges. And I think there are a lot of people that feels like the government is trying to shut him down. He's a rising star. I mean, he's in his early 40s, and he has done a lot to show that he is a people person when he was prime minister. Therefore, when he was incarcerated about a month ago, on trumped-up charges, on politically motivated charges, he took a position just a week ago to go on hunger strike. And the reason for that was to raise awareness to this incarceration, this injustice. And I think that he's called it off now, because we understand that physically he's become weak, even though he's in spirit, he's still very, very vigilant. And so he's called it off, I think, to avoid health complications, but also he has brought enough attention to his case, I think, around the continent as well as on the global stage.
So in Cameroon, Issa Bakary, a longtime friend and ally of President Paul Biya, has announced his plans to run for president. How significant is this development? Does it signal any real political shift in the country, long dominated by Biya himself? Or are we perhaps seeing, a secret plot by Biya to anoint a successor?
Well, this has two implications. First of all, it looks like Cameroon the political space is opening up. It looks like now people feel a little bit comfortable to come forward and want to run for public office. Unlike the last 40 years that Biya has ruled the country, he has had an iron grip on political activities. Now that the incumbent is 92 years old, probably won't even run again. We see that close allies and also oppositions are a little bit more involved in the politics of the country. So that's one aspect of it. But also, I think that it's just some people dismiss this as just his friend being opportunistic. He just wants to run now that he knows that his friend and his boss is physically incapable of running for office again.
Tell me a little bit about, are there people who are, apart from this friend and ally who's put his name forward, are there others, maybe in opposition, who are likely candidates, or as you say, one just doesn't say, one doesn't speak up for fear of retribution?
Yes, I think that we have an opposition leader. Not long ago, he was being harassed. I think he's about 71 or 72 years old. He is not an ally of Paul Biya. I think he's tried to make his mark in politics. But it's been difficult. You know, the Cameroonian political landscape has been very difficult to navigate because of the kind of leadership style that the incumbent has imposed on the country for so many years. But we've had one or two figures in the opposition that have tried hard to penetrate, but it's been difficult. I think that we're going to see that change in the upcoming elections. And for reason being, it's because the absence of this strong man at the helm of government might just create the opportunity for more people to come forward.
Let's look at Gabon. Under transitional military rule since last year, they've managed to secure a $2.3 billion loan from the African Import-Export Bank for infrastructure. What do we read into this? It's quite interesting that a military transitional government would get such a formal loan. Is this a sign of confidence in the junta or a pragmatic economic move?
Well, Peter, this junta has tried to camouflage itself, has tried to transition from being a military general to being a politician in suits. I think that even when he approaches some of these institutions, Western institutions and financial institutions, he is approaching them as a potential transformational leader. You know, he is approaching them as a guy that took over a dynasty of the Bongo family, and now he is interested in democracy. But we've seen some of these things play out in the continent before. We have a military leader come in and start very well, but then they overstay as well. In 1986, we had Yoweri Museveni in Uganda tell the people that the problem with Africa is that we have leaders who overstay in office. But today, in 2025, Yoweri Museveni says he's going for a re-election in 2026. So that tells you that, of course, there's always these, we're always excited that there's always this euphoria about the new leadership of some of these juntas when they come in. But it's very difficult to translate that from real democracy. But what we're seeing in Gabon, we hope that it will be a different story. We hope that this $3.2 billion that they have acquired from the Africa Import and Export Bank will actually go to the real infrastructure development that the country needs, rather than going to the pockets of the politicians.
I am curious about the position taken by international lenders like Afrexim Bank. They're increasingly willing to work with these transitional or military-led governments. Are they saying, look, as long as there's a solid economic case, we're not too concerned about the politics, because in the end, we're really more concerned about the citizens on the ground?
Well, that's always been the miscalculation by some of these institutions, especially Western institutions. They've always thought that, well, because we can give this money to whoever is a leader of the country, be it a military leader or even civilian politicians, that kind of assistance will trickle down to the people. And their argument is that this is good for the nation. But even without putting in safeguards or mechanisms that will monitor the facilitation and the use of these resources, and I think that is where such as the Africa Import and Export Bank should pay more attention to, is what are the mechanisms that are in place to facilitate that this kind of money that is given to Gabon actually goes or translates to what it is meant for.
All right, and perhaps finally, is there anything else that we really should be paying attention to in the region that we haven't talked about?
There are quite a few things happening in the region. We hearing about this court case in Zimbabwe about what happened in the 1980s, right after they got independence. I think you're aware of the Gugura Wundi case. This is the massacre that happened under the reign of Robert Mugabe, and now the Mnangagwa regime wants to put a closure to that. So they're trying to go for the courts to address the issue, as well as more of like a truth and reconciliation arrangement. But the opposition and few people are opposing that because they feel like President Mnangagwa was part of the Mugabe regime and state security minister at the time, and been accused by many people to have been a participant in those massacres, is not the right person to address these issues. So we see that unfolding, and we'll see where it goes. But Mnangagwa seems to be very fixed about trying to get this behind. Basically, some people think he wants to whitewash history and put this behind them.
Yeah, I mean, it is a difficult one, and you're so right. I think a lot of people only finding out years later just the full extent of what happened. The only media that was there at the time that people could consume was state media, and so they didn't really get the story, except the propaganda that was being meted out. Aaron, we're going to have to leave it there. Your insights and analysis always greatly appreciated. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you for having me, Peter. You have a wonderful day.
Thank you. That's Aaron Ngambi, one of our regular commentators from Central Africa, telling us about what's been happening in the region. And it's time now for your news headlines with Onele Nsinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. The West Africa Democracy Solidarity Network has issued a strong call for action amid rising threats to democracy, peace and security across the region. Pierre Pigo from International Crisis Group says kidnappings for ransoms are on the rise in Mozambique, Cabo Delgado province, adding that the situation continues to deteriorate. And the Israeli foreign minister says an opportunity to free the hostages held by Hamas in Gaza should not be missed. The details are yet to be worked out. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nsinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Let's find out what's happening in the world of sports. Now here's Musibudi Makura with our first full update on this 3rd of July.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Very good morning indeed from the sports desk. We'll start here. So Proteas head coach Shukri Conrad explained the reason he appointed all-rounder Wiaan Mulder as the captain for the test in the second test in Zimbabwe. So Mulder will skipper the side as they search for a 2-0 series victory. Conrad believes that Wiaan Mulder has all the qualities to lead and that he will thrive with the added responsibility.
I think he's obviously on top of his game at the minute. He's captain in his youth days, South Africa under 19, I think it is. He shows some really good leadership qualities. And I think this is part of his journey, where he's starting to take more responsibility in the side. And we've seen him do a lot of that on the series, the short series thus far. And I think it'll be a great opportunity for Wiaan to grow into becoming a leader in this group. He's got all the attributes.
Conrad also shares more light on the other candidates in the squad that could have been appointed in this leadership role.
We've obviously got guys like Carl Moreno, who captains Western Province as well. So a few candidates in that regard. But I just felt that it would probably be an opportune time and to ride the confident mood that Wiaan's in. And I mean, this might go a long way to freeing him up in a lot of ways, and also the added responsibility might. And I'd like to think that he gets the feeling that we really back him. If he hasn't had that feeling before, this will be like a real confirmation of that.
Right, we'll stay with cricket news. So, poor all-round performance from England saw India take a 2-0 lead in the 5-match T20 series with a convincing 24-run win at Bristol. Now, England dominated the opening power play as India slipped to 31 for the loss of 3 wickets, including Saturday's centurion Simartri Manhanda for 13, but contributions of 63 apiece from Jeremiah Rodriguez as well as Anjot Kaur led to a brilliant recovery to 181 for 4. So the pair added 93 for the 4th wicket as England lost control of the middle orders before Richa Ghosh, unbeaten 32, boosted the innings at the death. In reply, England's all too familiar batting frailties were exposed once again as they failed to recover from an early wobble to 17 for 3, eventually scrambling to 157 for 7 with Tammy Beaumont's 54 as well as a cameo of 35 from Sophie Ecclestone, eventually sort of helping to bring respectability to England's T20 performance in yesterday's game against England, eventually though losing that T20 match. On to some tennis news now. Last year's runner-up Jasmine Paolini became the latest top 10 seed to make an early exit at Wimbledon, but the world number 1 Aryna Sabalenka put this year's record number of upsets out of mind in a hard-fought victory. So the Italian 4th seed Paolini's 4-6, 6-4, 6-4 second round defeat by Kamila Rimkova came after 8 top 10 seeds across the men's as well as the women's singles draws went out across the opening 2 days, the most at a Grand Slam in the Open era. So, but Sabalenka avoided the same fate, should I say, with a gritty 7-6, 6-4 win over Czech world number 48 Maria Boskova. It also means that the only top 5 seed remaining in the women's draw at the All England club is Sabalenka. This after 2 days of action. The Belarusian is now aiming to add a maiden Wimbledon title to her 3 Grand Slam triumphs at the US Open as well as the Australian Open. After the win, she told the crowd on centre court that she hopes there will be no more upsets at this year's tournament, particularly looking, of course, at the top 5 players that have since made it out of the competition, including Coco Gauff, who was beaten in the first round just a few days ago. And finally, Formula One Chief Executive Stefano Domenicali says Silverstone Circuit could stay on the Formula One calendar forever with no real rival to host the British Grand Prix. Now, the Italian says he could not imagine a championship without Britain. Also home to 7 of the 10 teams, but there were also no chance of a country having more than just one race. Silverstone hosted the first World Championship race back in 1950 and has a contract until 2034. Last year it hosted the biggest crowd of any event on the calendar with 480,000 spectators. So Miami as well as Austria's Red Bull Ring have the longest deals, both running until 2034. And that's a wrap from the Sports Desk at the Sawa. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or give us a call. The newsroom line is +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Mosibu Di Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
África. Conhece o Ntivani? Claro que sou eu. Ntivani é o amante da música de corpo e alma. Eu amo música africana. Ele aprecia todos os tipos de melodias e passa os seus dias a ouvir a Channel África. Okay. Adivinha só, a Channel África quer ajudar o Ntivani e os amantes da música em todo o lado a descobrir ainda mais música incrível. Por isso, a Channel África está a convocar artistas africanos a submeterem as suas músicas. Músicos, lembrem-se de nos dar todas as informações relevantes no music@channelafrica.co.za. As submissões são a vossa oportunidade de ser ouvidos, mas não garantem inclusão na lista. Todas as submissões serão cuidadosamente analisadas para verificar se cumprem os requisitos da nossa estação. Canal África, a perspectiva africana.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine, weekdays 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
It's time now for a first look at what's been happening in the world of business, economics and commerce. And on our business desk this morning, we say good morning to Chanduko Ligege.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter, and good morning. French uranium miner Orano says its majority-owned joint venture with Niger, Somair, is on the verge of bankruptcy. This is a result of export restrictions imposed by Niger's military government. Orano was forced to suspend production at Somair after authorities halted exports last year. Niger's government ceased the operation in December and announced plans to nationalize it last month, joining a wave of West African governments seeking greater control of natural resources from foreign companies. Niger, which also exports gold and coal, is the world's 7th largest uranium producer. It has been a good year for gold. A host of turbulent events in the global economy has driven up prices for the glittery commodity to record highs in 2025. In a world of tariffs and international conflict, gold appeals to investors as one of the few remaining stable assets. For the governments of West Africa's Sahel region, the stakes are even higher. Gold is a lifeline for the military juntas of Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger, who are beleaguered by jihadist insurgencies. Kabisoso Kazeza has more.
A senior researcher at global consultancy firm Control Risk, Beverly Ocheng, said because gold prices have been at historic high, the military government are hoping that they will be able to benefit directly. The three Sahel states produce around 230 tons of gold per year, or about $15 billion at the current market rate. The combined gold production in these three states surpasses any other country in Africa. The governments say that the proceeds from the recreative sector are benefiting citizens through increased sovereignty.
The Chief Executive Officer of South Africa's Independent Development Trust says lack of enough budget hampers some of its projects. Tebogo Malaga was speaking at the infrastructure workshop convened by the Premier of the country's Limpopo province, Dr. Popi Ramathuba, in Polokwane. Ramathuba is concerned that infrastructure projects take long to be completed in the province. Malaga says budget cuts have been negatively affecting projects.
With government, the biggest challenge is funding. As you know, Treasury cut a lot of budget because of austerity measures. So that affected infrastructure development as well, because instead of us implementing 1 billion of project, the budget is cut, and therefore we have to do with what we are allocated. But IDT does projects on behalf of Department of Health, Department of Education, Department of Transport, so it's a variety of clients.
Kenyan President William Ruto says Kenya is planning to privatize some state assets via initial public offerings in order to bring in more private sector investment. He says the government planned to start with listing of the Kenya Pipeline Company via an IPO on the Nairobi Securities Exchange this year. Gabisoso Kazeza has more.
President Ruto said Kenya is committed to a structured program that identified and prepared a robust pipeline of key government assets to be privatized or improved through private sector participation. He said this will help the country and well-functioning domestic capital market to reduce reliance on external debt. Kenya has been seeking new sources of funding since nationwide protest last summer forced it to scrap planned tax hike worth almost $2.7 billion.
Venezuela has exported some 844,000 barrels of crude and fuel per day in June, an 8% increase from the previous month as the loss of the U.S. and European markets was offset by more cargoes sent to China. This comes after Washington terminated a group of licenses that had authorized partners of Venezuelan oil company PDVSA, including Chevron and Repsol, to take Venezuelan crude bound for U.S. and European refineries in late May. PDVSA has since ramped up exports to Asia, selling its crude and fuel through little-known intermediaries that make deals with independent refiners in China. Let's have a look at financial indicators at this hour. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 Naira 532, in Botswana 13 Pula 14. Kenya the dollar is at 128 shilling 47, Zambia 23 kwacha 96. BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is at 5 real 45, Russia 78 rubles 72, India 85 rupee 63, China 71.16, South Africa 17 rand 91 cents. $1 is 73 pence to the British pound and 85 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is at $3,347, platinum at $1,403 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil $68.50 a barrel. That is all for now. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa.
6:45 Central African time it is. Let's get into our G20 fact for this 3rd of July. Did you know that the G20 presidency steers the G20 agenda for 1 year and hosts the summit? The G20 consists of 2 parallel tracks, the finance track and the Sherpa track. Finance ministers and central bank governors lead the finance track, while the G20 process from the Sherpa side is coordinated by the Sherpas of member countries who are personal emissaries of the leaders. That's our G20 fact this morning.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa, championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability. From Cape to Cairo, Dakar to Dar es Salaam, rise and shine with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda on Channel Africa.
The long-running feud between US President Donald Trump and South African-born billionaire Elon Musk has flared up once again, and this time with Trump telling Musk to go back home. Yeah, the remark follows Musk's threat to launch a new political party aimed at challenging Republican incumbents in upcoming elections. Nick Harper picks up the story for us from Washington, D.C.
From bromance to bust-up, relations have continued to worsen between US President Donald Trump and Elon Musk. At issue is the billionaire's staunch opposition towards the president's key signature legislation, the Big Beautiful Bill, which President Trump is hoping Congress will pass before Friday this week. Musk has criticised the bill as a non-partisan organisation predicts it will add $3.3 trillion to the US national debt, as well as cuts to key services and healthcare provisions for vulnerable Americans. Musk has called Trump's legislation insane and has promised to launch the America Party, a third political party to rival the Republicans and the Democrats if the bill passes. He told his 220 million followers on X the US needs an alternative to the Democrat-Republican uniparty so that the people actually have a voice. The tech guru has also threatened to fund anyone who wants to challenge Republican lawmakers who are coming up for re-election. That's despite Musk being the country's biggest Republican donor, donating almost $300 million to Republican candidates in the 2024 election. Well, as you'd expect, Donald Trump has not taken the criticism well. He's already threatened to cut government contracts and subsidies for Musk's companies, including Tesla and SpaceX. And in one of his latest posts has added that without subsidies, Elon would probably have to close up shop and head back home to South Africa. And the president has suggested the department that Musk recently headed up, the Department of Government Efficiency, should now investigate Musk's companies and look for ways to save the government money. The president adding there would be big money to be saved. Nick Harper, SABC News, Washington.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Mix Vibration sur Channel Africa.
C'est notre invitée du jour, la belle Aïna Mwenze. Elle est là. Certaines l'appellent Boss Lady.
Bonjour Monsieur Jolino.
Parlez-nous un tout petit peu de vous.
Je m'appelle Boss Lady Aïna. Je mets l'accent sur le nom de Boss Lady parce que je mérite cela après le travail fait. Et c'est une rémunération en titre de la personne que je suis devenue aujourd'hui. Épouse et une mère de 4 garçons. Et voilà ce que je peux dire pour l'instant.
Et vous vous êtes lancé dans le business, comment c'est venu?
En tant que mère et se retrouvant dans les pays étrangers, particulièrement en Afrique du Sud, je me disais que laisser les enfants sur la charge des travailleurs ou d'une bonne, ça serait pas très intéressant. Je me suis dit, bon, je dois essayer de m'organiser et trouver un emploi que je peux faire.
Mix Vibration, tous les dimanches de 18h à 19h, temps universel. Vue d'Afrique avec Joël Mouteba.
Cette peur d'un point de non-retour nucléaire suffit-elle selon vous à légitimer une telle offensive, Monsieur Talasi?
Absolument pas du tout. Cela fait plus de 30 ans que l'Israël crie haut et fort sur les toits, où il veut se faire entendre que l'Iran serait à 1 an pour obtenir l'arme nucléaire. Parfois, l'Iran serait à 6 mois. Parfois, l'Iran serait à 2 semaines pour obtenir son arme nucléaire. Et curieusement, jusqu'à ce jour, il n'y a toujours aucune preuve que l'Iran a obtenu cette arme nucléaire en dépit des déclarations d'Israël et de certaines puissances parfois.
Vue d'Afrique, du lundi au vendredi de 15h à 16h, temps universel.
Wake up to the essence of the continent. Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
South Africa's University of KwaZulu-Natal, UKZN, together with Hong Kong-based tech company Utility, have partnered to introduce a cutting-edge artificial intelligence-driven technology set to transform how electricity is managed. This move is in line with UKZN's vision to become South Africa's first predominantly renewable green university, while also marking a significant step forward in developing a blueprint for future national energy distribution. To tell us more about how it works is Wayne Mostert, Director at Utility. Wayne, good morning to you. Thanks for joining us on Rise and Shine.
All right, it sounds like that we haven't got him on the line yet, but we're hoping to be able to speak to him. It's an interesting initiative that his company is involved in. I know he's a director and shareholder at Utility, and they provide, AI-driven solutions. And that seems to be quite a thing nowadays. It's almost as if you can't function without AI anymore. And if you are not getting on board, you're going to get left behind.
Yeah, it seems like that. And I think UKZN also being significant in that the students will maybe even try and be involved in the project somehow. And I'd want to know how and in what ways that can also bridge a gap between academic learning and the industries that are shaping our energy future. Well, we'll see if we get that chat and unpack all those topics and questions.
Yeah, I mean, to tell you a little bit more about utility that this Wayne Mustard comes from, it's a tech company specializing in AI-driven utility management solutions. And he recently came into the spotlight during Utilities Partnership, as you say, with UKZN. Wisdom, the platform is called. And I wonder so much about it. I'm fascinated by AI. Do you use it at all, AI?
We do, I guess.
Do you use it at all?
No, not really.
No? I promise you, it's. I think we do, though. I mean, if you think nowadays, you go onto Google. It used to be you just write what is XYZ, but Google has started itself to give you some AI solutions. Try it now when you've got a moment, and you'll see that you get a little bit more than what you just asked for, because Google itself has an AI solution. But, you know, as I said, this is something that everybody now, whether you like it or not, you're going to be caught up in. Much like when email came into being. All right, okay. We'll try and get to UKZN and that partnership with Utility and Wayne Mustard in a short while. But in the meantime, what are we looking at?
We're looking at Amy Pope, Director General of the International Organization for Migration, or IOM, saying investing in future of communities that are most likely to migrate to other countries is more effective than spending money on reinforcing border security. Pope was speaking to UN News' Matt Wells on the sidelines of the UN's 4th International Conference on Financing for Development.
There are two angles that we have when we come to a conference like this one. First of all is that when we look at the number of people who are on the move, increasingly people are on the move because of development issues, right? Of course, there are those who are moving because of war, persecution, or conflict. But increasingly, the number of people who are moving because of the impacts of climate on their communities or their livelihoods or their homes, or poverty or lack of job opportunities is at the heart of why people are moving. So if we want to end irregular migration, creating development solutions is really at the heart of it. The flip side of it, though, and the World Bank has done incredible research on the issue, is that migration can be a catalyst for development. It's a catalyst for the migrant herself or himself, of course, in terms of being able to earn more money or being able to get access to the job market. But it also fuels development in the country the migrant is coming from and the country where the migrant has gone to work.
What do migrants need from this conference themselves in practical terms that's going to improve their lives while also not adding to the economic burdens of host countries?
There are a couple of places where I think there could be real improvements. First and foremost, we know that remittances are driving economic development in low and middle income countries. In fact, more than $700 billion of remittances went into low and middle income countries. And so finding ways for remittances to go back with lower transaction fees, so more of the money is getting into those communities, and then partnering with communities, partnering with local governments so that remittances can actually fuel more systematic development is absolutely key. So that's one. And then thinking about return migration in a way that fuels development. So if somebody has been living and working elsewhere in the world, they've often learned new skills or new languages, new ways of doing things, new technology. Ensuring that transfer of knowledge back to their home communities is critical.
So Syria is a good case in point in that respect, isn't it?
Absolutely. And in fact, in Syria, we saw the out-migration of many professionals with high levels of education, high levels of skill. And that is what Syria is going to need to rebuild. We're going to need to have people with know-how, whether it's in construction or manufacturing, in medicine, in education, to go back and rebuild the country. And so marrying the development and recovery objectives with the return objectives is key.
You mentioned that remittances are a huge benefit, but migrants do need investment and support on many levels. How do you convince sceptical countries who say that they just can't afford the cost?
We see that migration around the world is enabling communities to do more, and we see it in every part of the world. What we encourage governments to do is to create policies that enable and facilitate safe and legal migration. Because there are two sides to this. When people are coming irregularly, they're more likely to be exploited, they're more likely to be underpaid, which thereby depresses wages for national workers. It ultimately leads to a host of ills that no country can afford right now. So ultimately, this is not a question of what countries can afford. It should be what countries can do to improve outcomes for their own people.
What other concrete steps or commitments is IOM hoping to secure here in Sevilla?
Well, number one, getting migration into the conversation is the most important, and taking it out of the purely reactive humanitarian space is critical, because we know that if you get to a point where a migrant is on a boat heading across the Mediterranean, uncertain of whether they're going to make it, owing lots of money to smugglers or traffickers along the way, we have completely failed. So our goal is to make sure that we have governments thinking, talking, acting, using migration as a tool for development from the very beginning. So that's first. And then there are a whole host of very concrete objectives that we'd like to see. Lower remittance fees being one of them. Diaspora bonds could be another one. Thinking proactively about how we anticipate the impacts of climate on vulnerable communities so that people aren't forced to move is another.
So finally, the migration issue in the United States is very thorny, it's very political. What would you be saying to the US if they were here this week, which of course they're not?
I would say that investing in development that is focusing on communities who are most likely to out-migrate is a much better investment than just investing at your border. Once somebody has paid a smuggler, come all the way up, gotten into the border, across the border and into the United States, it is far more expensive, far more labor intensive, far more traumatic for the communities they've lived in and the migrant, him or herself, than it would be to come up with solutions where migrants are coming from or in the countries that they first go to. So this is good value for money. It's not just about better development outcomes.
That was Amy Pope, Director General of the International Organization for Migration, or IOM, speaking to UN News' Matt Wells. And that brings us to 7 o'clock Central African time. We enter now the second hour of Africa Rise and Shine. If you've just joined us, well, a very good morning to you. My name is Asanda Beda.
And I'm Peter Ndoro. Thanks for tuning in. And coming up this hour, Nigeria's opposition is scrambling to build momentum ahead of the 2027 general elections. But cracks are already beginning to show within the newly formed All Democratic Alliance. We'll unpack this and other stories. But first, let's catch you up with the news with Onele Nsinsi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. The West Africa Democracy Solidarity Network, or WADEMOS, has issued a strong call for action amid rising threats to democracy, peace and security across the region. From controversial constitutional changes in Togo to political tensions in Cote d'Ivoire, Guinea and Ghana, concerns are mounting over shrinking democratic space and weakened institutions. Austin Aigbe from WADEMOS explains.
Sahel region, particularly on the belt northern Nigeria, Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali was worst hit at a time, but gradually it's moving towards Senegal, which usually was a very peaceful location. ECOWAS standby force, which is supposed to play a huge role in coordinating action to ward off those insurgency groups, they had argued that ECOWAS refused to come to their aid when they had security challenge. The crisis in the Sahel continue unabated. The military regime who came to power riding on the insecurity in their own country and of course in the region is not able to deal with insecurity.
A fifth person has been added to the case of 4 individuals arrested in connection with the 2021 July unrest in South Africa. The firefighter alleged to have posted inciting messages in a WhatsApp chat group named Zuma Real Activist 100%. Authorities believe these messages contributed to the public violence and looting of retail stores in the Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal provinces at the time. The unrest was to protest against the arrest of the former President Jacob Zuma. The accused appeared briefly at the Roodepoort Magistrate Court in Johannesburg. They face charges of conspiracy to commit public violence and 2 counts of incitement to commit public violence. One of the accused, Buhadi Mapisa, is a member of Zuma's MK party. She insists that she is innocent.
I feel that there's a lot of injustice that is going on. When the public violence that I'm accused of started, I was at work. I am a nurse by profession. Even if they want, they can go and check my register. I have signed in and out of work. So I do not know why am I charged of something that I did not do. I know nothing of this. Maybe my sin is that I am a fan of my president, Jacob Gedleyihlekisa Zuma.
Piers Pigo from International Crisis Group says kidnappings for ransom are on the rise in Mozambique's Cabo Delgado province. Aid agencies say the situation continues to deteriorate, with fresh reports revealing a sharp rise in child abductions and mass displacements. They say at least 120 children have been kidnapped by armed groups since the beginning of the year. This is according to figures released by the local non-governmental organization Kwendelea. Pigo explains.
We're also seeing abductions which are now being turned into ransom kidnappings. So they're being used by the insurgents in various parts for eliciting some kind of funding. So there's a range of factors involved here, and it is a smaller number in terms of children, and you've indicated this includes young women and young girls who are brought in as brides and so forth, and as sexual slaves. And there has been a number of these people who have been successfully rescued by the Mozambican and Rwandan and Salmon forces over the last few years.
The bail application of 12 South African National Defence Force Special Task Force members is expected to resume at the Randburg Magistrate Court in Johannesburg this morning. The group is facing charges related to the 2023 murder of Hawks Specialist Investigator Lieutenant Colonel Franz Matiba. They are also facing charges relating to the kidnapping and disappearance of an Ethiopian national and alleged ISIS leader Abdullah Abidaga in December 2022. Matiba was reportedly investigating the disappearance of Abadiga when he was gunned down in August 2023. He was shot while driving on the N1 near the Hammanskraal off-ramp. And lastly, the Israeli foreign minister says an opportunity to free the hostages held by Hamas in Gaza should not be missed. Gideon Saar's comments come after U.S. President Donald Trump said Israel had agreed to finalize a deal on hostages releases and a 60-day ceasefire. The details are yet to be worked out, the BBC's Wise Davis explains.
Most people in Israel will want to see that this 60-day ceasefire deal does include the release of most, if not all, of the remaining hostages being held in Gaza. For the Hamas Palestinian delegations, the key thing is going to be some sort of long-term ceasefire, long-term peace deal guaranteed by the Americans that goes beyond the 60-day ceasefire agreement, and also a partial withdrawal of Israeli troops from parts of Gaza.
Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Ntsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, João Pedro's arrival will boost Chelsea ahead of the Palmeiras FIFA Club World Cup quarter-final test, while Emma Raducanu beats 2023 champion Marketa Vondrousova to set up an Arena Sabalenka tie in the third round at Wimbledon. Details of these and other stories coming up at 7:30.
Start your day informed, inspired, and entertained. Asanda and Peter bring you Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time.
On the Rise and Shine team is Hlengiwe Mabaso on production, Pumutso Ramakadza and Joey Likhodi. On news is Onele Nsinzi. On economics news, Chandugo Lugege. On sports is Musibudi Makura. Social media is Nomalanga Butelezi. And Ndando Lutuli is our technical producer. That's the team that brings you Rise and Shine every Monday to Friday, 6 till 9. The African Development Bank Group has warned that the geopolitics tensions, cut to official development assistance, and imposition of tariffs on exports are some challenges that may impede South Africa and the rest of the continent's economic growth. The bank has launched its South Africa Country Focus Report in Centurion. South Africa remains one of the dynamic economies in Africa, underpinned by a diversified economic base, strategic geographic location, and ongoing commitment to structural transformation. Bonolo Maribe has more.
A precarious global space may present challenges in South Africa's quest to grow its economy. On the country's focus reports, the African Development Bank Group has revealed that Africa's largest economy must deal with infrastructure deficits, unresolved problems in electricity provision, and cautioned that other global factors, including sweeping tariffs and China's economic slowdown. Chief country economist for the AFDB, Paul Puga, has more.
The shocks and uncertainty have been part of the causes for low growth, not only South Africa, but the rest of the continent. And what we are seeing now, the geopolitical tensions, the escalating trade restrictions and tariffs, the cut in international aid, not only for South Africa, but for the rest of the continent and other developing countries, these impact the growth of our countries.
United States also remains South Africa's largest export destination after China. Pretoria and some sub-Saharan countries are benefiting from the preferential market access under AGOA. However, senior national country economist for the AFDB, Akona Peter, says the introduction of tariffs may disrupt trade flows.
The renewal of AGOA will be very important, not just for South Africa, but some of also the SACU countries, but very important for agriculture, the farmers that currently receive preferential export tariffs to America. So if it's not renewed and we receive a very high trade tariff, it's going to cause a lot of jobs.
Program head for the Economic Resilience and Inclusion Program at the South African Institute of International Affairs, Joseph Matola, says that African nations must push for intra-Africa trade under the instruments like African Continental Free Trade to realize the continent's full potential.
The AFCFTA is an important project, but its implementation has been very, very slow. There was the Guiding Trade Initiative that was launched a few years back to try to kickstart the trading under the AFCFTA, but to this day, there isn't much that has been done. I think countries need to step up.
The report was launched as South Africa chairs the G20, which remains one of the influential blocs, and Pretoria has placed an emphasis on championing the African interest during its tenure. Bonolo Maribe, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Education is more than a basic human right. It's a powerful engine for economic growth. UNESCO says that every dollar spent on education can yield up to $15 in returns, yet failing to invest could cost the global economy a staggering $10 trillion over the next decade. Now, speaking at the Sustainable Development Conference in Spain, UNESCO's Assistant Director General for Education, Stefania Gianni, stressed the urgent need to prioritize education in global financial reform efforts. She was speaking to Matt Wells of UN News.
Education as a human right is for sure, as a fundamental human right, important to protect, to promote. But also education as a cornerstone for development. And most importantly, in this context here in Sevilla, that we are discussing about financing and reforming the financial architecture for development, education as a main driver for economic growth. $1 spent in education is up to $15, while the cost of inaction is equally enormous. We estimated that children not going to school, lack of skills for this generation will actually generate a cost of 10 trillion for the coming 10 years to the global community. So that's why we think that education is a very unique combination of a moral imperative about a human right to be provided everybody with and the strategic investment to make. Culture is the other side of the coin, let me say. Culture is about identity. Culture is about a sense of belonging to. Culture is about the cultural heritage. And UNESCO is the only organization in the world where these two sides of the coin come together.
Give us some examples where the work of UNESCO has helped support sustainability and responsible economic growth.
Let me give you a concrete example in Iraq. You know, after a long war, UNESCO took the leadership about reconstruction. Of course, cultural heritage in that context, Mosul, you know, the crossroad of different cultures and civilizations across the centuries.
Destroyed by war.
Destroyed by war, by Daesh, I mean, all these terrible things that actually ended in 2017, obliged somehow UNESCO to see the situation through the lens of this spirit of Mosul to be reconstructed, which means the mosque for sure, which means the Christian churches, which means the library of the universities, but also very much importantly, schools, technical and vocational training for the next generation of young people in the town. And now we can say that Mosul has an option to build a new, better future through this, combination of, and this is about development. This is about the end of the war, the end of the conflict, and an organization coordinating about this important, example. But another good example of how we are bringing together these two important drivers for development, and also, let me say, because it's not obvious to everybody, these two components of society conducive to peace and stability is Ukraine. In Ukraine, on one side is about protecting as much as possible, unfortunately a conflict is still ongoing there, as you know, the cultural heritage from university buildings to museum and so on and so forth. So monitoring the situation and trying to identify the important sites, including Odessa, just to give a concrete example. But on the other side, we are on the side of the Ministry of Education to make continuity of learning happen, to build digital transformation. So, two concrete different contexts that demonstrate that it's very much worth not to forget that soft power is very much harder in terms of the impact than many other means.
So what is the challenge that we face? Today you announced international aid to education is likely to shrink by a quarter over just 4 years. How can the Sevilla platform for action help turn this around?
Listen, we are here to, let's say, not stating the obvious. Everybody is absolutely, I suppose, in agreement that education is important. But what is not obvious that we must, let's say, reiterate the message that it's a strategic investment. And at a time where the international aid for development is going to decrease by, as you mentioned, 25% in the next couple of years, we must work at least on three important points. Number one, to be more agile, to simplify our mechanism for investment within the UN system and the international financial architecture, and that's the work we are doing with partners. Number two, to be innovative and to start to think to concrete solutions. And number three, and that's maybe the most important part of the story, to make the Sevilla platform a real space for bringing the solution into place. Let me give you an example. DEB Swap for Education was not in the picture at all. Now we are working with our partners, Global Partnership for Education, AFD, countries like France and Côte d'Ivoire, to demonstrate that DEB swaps for education work very well, and they can provide at national level the tools to transform in teachers' policies, in digital transformation, in foundational learning outcomes, and so on and so forth. So it's a different approach, let me say. It's not about simply, and crucially for us, reiterating the message that as human beings, we are born to learn, and learning is a right, lifelong, not simply in schools, but it's very much, talking to a larger audience, including the private sector, that once again, $1, $15. So it means that for the global south, for developing countries, it's quite crucial that this investment remains and possibly will multiply by innovative financing mechanisms.
Just very briefly, how important are digital platforms, AI, and harnessing its full learning potential to sustainable growth to UNESCO?
I do believe that is about focusing on the power, to the potential to unlock through providing teachers and students competencies to really manage AI for the best. That's what we are doing. We published recently 4 months ago the very first 2 competency frameworks, very simple guidelines for ministers, for teachers, for education communities to deal with AI in a way that AI is really changing the model for the future. I think the Global South has a unique opportunity to jump to a different level of quality of education through technology. But this technology must be ethically driven, must be funded through connectivity, competencies once again, and content.
That was UNESCO's Stefania Gianni speaking to Matt Wells of UN News in Sevilla in Spain.
So let's go back.
New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Let's get back to the story now. South Africa's University of KwaZulu-Natal, or UKZN, together with Hong Kong-based tech company Utility, have partnered to introduce cutting-edge artificial intelligence-driven technology set to transform how electricity is managed. This move is in line with UKZN's vision to become South Africa's first predominantly renewable green university, while also marking a significant step forward in developing a blueprint for future national energy distribution. To tell us more about how it works is Wayne Mostert, Director at Utility. Wayne, thank you for joining us and welcome to Rise and Shine.
Good morning, Asanda. Thank you for having me on your show and giving us the platform to introduce this transformative JV between Utility and UKZN University, essentially reshaping South Africa's energy future through our smart, decentralized technology. So thank you for this platform.
It's our pleasure. So take us through how this technology actually works.
Well, there's sort of two factors to it in terms of what does it do initially for the university. So for UKZN, this is more than just an energy upgrade. It's essentially a strategic transformation. Through this JV, UKZN is on track to become the first predominantly renewable powered university, essentially using solar energy, smart batteries, and AI-driven operating systems. The UKZN will establish a spin-off company focused essentially on energy innovation and commercializing student and staff deployment for engagement. The professor who's the acting deputy vice chancellor for research and innovation has called this a defining moment. And the professor who's driving this is Professor Lee Jarvis, and he is the director of UKZN's Power Engineering program. And he's described as a shift towards resilient, decentralized energy systems built on solar storage and AI. In terms of how does it really work, if you had to imagine the university as a small town with its own power station, the solar panels collect energy from the sun, as we know it. The energy is then stored in smart battery banks, and an AI brain proprietary operating system decides where to send the energy, when to send it, and how to send it in real time. People essentially will only pay for what they use, using a system as secure as online banking. Essentially, it's a efficient, intelligent, and it's load shedding proof. So in terms of what is different from traditional energy systems, What makes us different from conventional solar as we know it, we're moving away from centralized and outdated infrastructure, and utility system is decentralized and it's secure and sentient. Part of our operating system is a sentient smart meter, which is an advanced type of smart energy meter that goes beyond basic consumption and tracking. It uses real-time data, AI and machine learning to make intelligent, autonomous decisions about energy usage, how it's built, and how energy is distributed. It's connected to many different data sets, including weather patterns. So think of it as a smart meter with a brain capable of thinking, learning, and acting, not just measuring. Essentially, the system measures energy usage in real time through our blockchain billing integrated into our sentient meters, making payments fair and secure, transparent, and audible. It essentially communicates usage data back to a centralized system via a cloud or local network, which is through our operating system. And it enables dynamic pricing, accurate billing, and autonomous load balancing. The meter is aware of its environment. It can detect grid conditions, peak load outages, and it's more than just reporting. It reacts and adapts to the current trends in terms of how power is transmitted.
So this technology is also to tackle an issue that South Africa faces with its energy, which is load shedding. How will it do this?
Well, essentially, it's more than just load shedding. The fact that it's an operating system that is a utility brain capable of making real-time and local decisions. If you compare this to digital disruption of Netflix replacing Blockbuster, it's basically doing the same thing. In fact, it's digital disruption of the energy space. So essentially, how would this work in terms of South Africa and its consumers? It essentially will reduce theft, cut costs, keep power flowing in unstable grid conditions, supports decentralized energy models like solar and microgrids, and enables community-level autonomy and energy management. So the model is built for efficiency and fairness. It is really essentially a visionary blending technology and education and sustainability in a unique African way. In relation to load shedding, what it essentially does, it understands where to push energy at the right time in terms of those tariff models. It takes the legacy problems that has incurred on the grid, and it ensures that the energy is deployed effectively, efficiently, and managed optimally. So therefore, energy essentially is deployed in the right kind of way. So for consumers, I'll just give you maybe a scenario that kind of explains it. Each building, so from a campus perspective, each building has a utility sentient smart meter. The meter communicates its energy demand usage and solar input. The system makes intelligent decisions like prioritizing power to the laboratory during peak times, being able to charge batteries when solar is abundant, and blocks overuse of alert tampering. The operating system isn't just software, it's a living AI unity brain capable of making real-time local decisions. So if you compare it to a situation where a home has not got energy and another home has energy, it knows when and how to push excess energy back into either the home or a street or a community at the right tariff planning and right tariff modeling. So it ensures that energy is deployed efficiently, effectively, and you don't have a situation where you're going to have load shedding. It actually eradicates load shedding.
So the University of KwaZulu-Natal has essentially been positioned as a test bed for this next generation energy technology. What about the university made it the preferred choice?
Well, I think that essentially we were commissioned by Eskom to engage with the university. And the university essentially is a university that looks at optimizing the best energy platforms that it has to offer on behalf of Eskom and various other municipality institutions. The university obviously looked at the technology that we have built and deployed, and in their mind, it was a visionary adaptation to how energy needs to be deployed in a decentralized environment. Therefore, the university being able to set up a spin-off company that allows the deployment of utility within their system, ensuring that cheaper energy is deployed, it's being able to be measured, it's being able to be stored in an environment that the university benefits from.
What role will students play in this project, and how do you see this technology bridging the gap between academic learning and the industries shaping our energy future?
That's a very good question, and I think that it really is transformative in the sense that besides the actual platform itself, we'll be embracing the students of today and tomorrow in relation to working on the platform, building various different technology stacks within their environment. So it's also creating jobs, social responsibility, and those kind of initiatives which are being deployed.
Where do you see the future of electricity going as far as the types of systems and microgrids we'll be seeing and having to adapt to in our energy needs?
I think that the legacy problems with most utility providers in the world, and certainly we have our real core challenges in South Africa. I think that going from a centralized environment into a decentralized environment is kind of what's happening. I think the advent of technology, blockchain, AI being implemented in conjunction with the utility providers, the utility providers have to change from centralized or in part to become decentralized in sustainable energy. And what the platform actually does, it works in conjunction with just energy transmission strategy, ensuring that we have a sustainable energy platform whereby consumers are treated fairly in terms of real-time billing, that the utility provider can also access future storage and consumption, therefore taking strain off the grid. And what's really, really important is that the billing is transparent, autonomous, and it ensures that you are essentially paying for real-time energy as opposed to an average on tariff.
Wayne, thanks again for chatting to us as Channel Africa.
Thank you very much.
Wayne Mostert is director at Utility. They've entered into a partnership with South Africa's University of KwaZulu-Natal, or UKZN, to introduce cutting-edge artificial intelligence-driven technology in the electricity or energy space. 7:30 Central African time it is. Let's get our news headlines from Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. The West Africa Democracy Solidarity Network has issued a strong call for action amid rising threats to democracy, peace and security across the region. The South African Human Rights Commission has warned that if foreign nationals are continuously denied access to healthcare in South Africa, illnesses such as TB and HIV will remain a major concern. And UN officials say armed gangs have further tightened their grip on Haiti despite efforts by police and the Kenya-led international forces. Channel Africa News, I am Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Right, time to find out what's been happening in the world of sport, and lots of women football taking place at the moment. And with all the details, we have Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Peter, and a very good morning from the Sports Desk. So with all eyes of the continent fixed now on East Africa, Kenya has made a bold statement of intent by officially handing over the refurbished Kasarani Stadium to the local organising committee. This is ahead of the 2024 Total Energies African Nations Championship tournament. So the stadium, which has undergone extensive renovations, will not only serve as Kenya's primary venue, but also host the final match of the competition on the 30th of August. Now, the symbolic handover was conducted by Kenya's Cabinet Secretary for Sports, Salim Vora, who also said the move marked a critical milestone in the country's journey towards hosting the 8th edition of the Chan tournament. Meanwhile, the Moi International Sports Centre, popularly known as Kasarani, will host all Group A matches involving the host side Kenya, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Morocco, Angola, as well as Zambia. Harambee Stars under South African coach Benny McCarthy will open their campaign at the same venue against the DR Congo on Sunday, the 3rd of August. The Chan tournament will be co-hosted by Kenya, Uganda and Tanzania, running from the 2nd until the 30th of August. Meanwhile, Tanzania's Benjamin Mkapa Stadium in Dar es Salaam will host the opening match between the Taifa Stars as well as Burkina Faso, while Uganda's Nelson Mandela Stadium in Kampala will stage the early fixtures for Group C. Meanwhile, Nyayo National Stadium in Nairobi will host several Group A fixtures, including Morocco versus Angola. Will also be given a positive state of readiness update regarding that stadium, while Zanzibar has also been added to the list of Chan 2024 venues. Now, the new Amam Stadium, which recently hosted the CAF Confederation Cup final just a few months back, will stage Group D matches featuring Senegal, Congo, Sudan, as well as Nigeria. With venues now secured, stadiums upgraded, and the countdown officially underway, East Africa is poised now to deliver a historic Chan tournament that promises more for African football fans. Onto this now, new signing João Pedro could make his debut for Chelsea when they renew acquaintances with Brazilian Alfred Palmeiras in the quarterfinals of the FIFA Club World Cup on Friday. The 23-year-old Brazilian forward completed a move to Chelsea from Brighton and Hove Albion for a reported $79 million on Wednesday, and immediately began training with Enzo Maresca's squad in Miami. Now, there is where they have been preparing for their last 8 of the tournament in the USA before travelling back to Philadelphia on Thursday. That's, of course, later on today ahead of the clash with the Sao Paulo side Palmeiras on Friday. There are also other possibilities that the first trophy for the new signing could come in just 10 days' time if Chelsea go all the way in the FIFA's lucrative new competition. The London club beat Palmeiras in the final of this old FIFA Club World Cup in Abu Dhabi in early 2022, although none of the players involved for them that day are still around. Now, newcomers came in a few months after that success, and Chelsea's squad has now undergone major changes since then, with João Pedro just the latest face to join the side. So João Pedro has also began his career at Fluminense, another Brazilian side who they could also face in the semi-finals of the FIFA Club World Cup. A team from Rio de Janeiro take on Al Hilal of Saudi Arabia in the last 8 for a place in the semi-finals of this competition. We'll stay with football news. Switzerland took a lead against Norway but fell by 2-1 on home soil after scoring an own goal on the opening day of the Women's Euro 2025 Championship on Wednesday, with Norwegian captain Ada Hegerberg netting the equaliser and then also missing a penalty. Now, the host side had plenty of opportunities to grab, but would have also been a famous victory if they managed to beat the Norwegian side on the day to win that match. But of course, it was the Norwegian side who managed to beat Switzerland by 2-1. Having lost to Norwegian twice in the Nations League this year, the home side dominated the opening 45 minutes. Now, Swiss coach Pierre Sujaj was unhappy that her side did not manage to get more from that game against their opponents. And finally, British number one Emma Raducanu produced one of the best displays in recent times to sweep aside 2023 champion Marketa Vondrousova and reach the Wimbledon third round on Wednesday. In an outstanding performance marked by authority as well as intensity, the 22-year-old won 6-3 and 6-3 in just 82 minutes amid an electric atmosphere on centre court. It was also a level the former US Open champion will need to replicate if she is to improve when she meets the world number one Aryna Sabalenka in the next round to equal her best run at the championship in 2021 and 2024.
I mean, there were some points that I have no idea how I turned around. I think one for sure that I remember in the second set, but I knew playing Marketa, it was going to be an extremely difficult match. I mean, she's won this tournament and it's a huge, huge achievement. So she's also in form really well. So I'm just so happy with how I competed, put my game out on the court, and I was just really focused the whole way through.
Right, so that's a wrap from the sports desk at the Sawa. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibu Di Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. This Mandela Month, Channel Africa invites you to walk the footsteps of a giant. From the prison yard of Robben Island to the halls of the United Nations, Nelson Mandela's legacy reminds us that service, compassion, and justice are the building blocks of real freedom.
En cette journée Mandela, que nos actions fassent écho à son héritage.
Alionyesha dunia ya kwamba sauti moja yaweza kuhamasisha mataifa.
Mandela ensinou-nos que a liberdade não é dada, mas sim conquistada através da coragem e sacrifício.
Join us as we reflect, remember, and reignite the spirit of Madiba across the continent. This is more than a day. It's a call to action. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Get Channel Africa on DSTV Audio Bouquet. Channel 802.
Right, let's check in with the world of business now as we get news from Chandugo Ligege within that field.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. Kenya is planning to privatize some state assets via initial public offerings in order to bring in more private sector investment. This was mentioned by President William Ruto at the London Stock Exchange. The Kenyan government is planning to start with listing the Kenya Pipeline Company via an initial public offering IPO on the Nairobi Securities Exchange this year. Joey Luhodi has more.
President Ruto also says that well-functioning domestic capital markets could reduce reliance on external debt. Kenya has been seeking new sources of funding since deadly nationwide protests last summer forced it to pursue austerity measures and scrap planned tax hikes worth more than $2.68 billion. Separately, at the Africa Debate event yesterday, Ruto said that following shocks such as U.S. President Donald Trump's elimination of USAID this year, Kenya is working to rely on its own resources and private investments rather than resources the country does not have control over.
South Africa's youth unemployment crisis continues to deepen, with a staggering 62.4% of those aged 15 to 24 now without work. But amidst these grim figures, a story of hope is emerging from the private sector. Concentric South Africa is making a tangible difference through its development and leadership programs, transforming lives and offering a pathway to employment for hundreds of young South Africans. Director at Concentric South Africa, Jason Locke, says they have the ability to create positive business outcomes for the youth.
The youth of South Africa is absolutely brimming with potential. You know, Concentrics is a great learning organisation. We've got the ability to help unlock that potential to create really positive business outcomes for our international. So getting great outcomes for the country in terms of one of the biggest challenges that it currently faces. Unlike traditional hiring strategies, Our approach really focuses on providing opportunities for those from underrepresented communities. And what we're wanting to do there is remove the barriers to entry that they face.
Still in South Africa, the Chief Executive Officer at Independent Development Trust says lack of enough budget hampers some of its projects. Tebogo Malaga was speaking at the infrastructure workshop convened by the Premier of the country's Limpopo province, Dr. Phophi Ramathuba, in Polokwane. Ramathuba is concerned that infrastructure projects take long to be completed in the province. Malaga says budget cuts have been negatively affecting projects.
With government, the biggest challenge is funding. As you know, Treasury cut a lot of budget because of austerity measures. So that affected infrastructure development as well, because instead of us implementing 1 billion of project, the budget is cut, and therefore we have to do with what we are allocated. But IDT does projects on behalf of Department of Health, Department of Education, Department of Transport, so it's a variety of clients.
French uranium miner Orano says its majority-owned joint venture with Niger, Somair, is on the verge of bankruptcy. This is a result of exports restriction imposed by Niger's military government. Orano was forced to suspend production at Somair after authorities halted exports last year. Niger's government ceased the operation in December and announced plans to nationalize it last month, joining a wave of West African governments seeking greater control of natural resources from foreign companies. Niger, which also exports gold and coal, is the world's 7th largest uranium producer. Republican leaders in the U.S. Congress have delayed a vote on President Trump's tax and immigration bill as they scramble to overcome objections from members of their own party. The Big Beautiful Bill, as it's known, was passed by the Senate on Tuesday, but some Republicans in the House of Representatives are unhappy as it will add trillions to the national debt while cutting health care. The BBC's Peter Bowes has the details.
This is now a different bill to what was originally passed by the House. Some of the details have changed, and that's what some Republicans object to. And there are objections really on two main areas. The right of the party, the Conservatives in the Republican Party, object to the size of the spending, the fact that this bill is going to add several $1 trillion to the budget deficit in the United States. And those moderates in the Republican Party object to the cuts in healthcare spending in terms of health insurance, Medicaid.
$1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira, 532 in Botswana, 13 pula, 14. Kenya, the dollar is at 128 shilling 47. Zambia, 23 kwacha 96. BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is at 5 real 45. Russia, 78 rubles 72. India, 85 rupee 63. China, 7 yuan 16. South Africa, 17 rand 91 cents. $1 is at 73 pence to the British pound and 85 to the euro. Commodities, gold is at $3,347, platinum at $1,403 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil at $68.50 a barrel. That is all for now. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chandruko Ligege.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
46 minutes past 7 Central African Time. South Africa's Minister in the Presidency, Khumbudzo Chabeni, along with Deputy Minister Nongceba Mhlauli, has presented the Statistics South Africa budget vote to Parliament. This follows community outreach efforts by government officials, senior Stats SA executives, councillors and local leaders ahead of the presentation. Channel Africa business reporter Innocent Samosa filed this report.
The budget comes at a time when Stats SA is facing an ongoing funding shortfalls, which have impacted its ability to carry out large-scale surveys like the population census and quarterly labor force survey. Limited resources also threaten data quality and coverage. Khumbudzo Chabeni is the minister in the presidency.
and therefore it is my honor to table the budget vote 14, Statistics South Africa. The MTF allocation is 2.77 billion in 2025-2026 and 2.91 billion in 2026-2027 and 3.04 billion in 2027-2028 financial years, which is an average growth of a rate of 4.7%. The main divisions in vote 14 are administration, 742 million, economic statistics, 310.5 million, population and social statistics, 307.7 million, methodology and statistical infrastructure, 166.1 million, statistical support and informatics, 306.7, statistical operations and provincial coordination, 889.2, South African National Statistics System, 48.4 million.
She urged members of parliament to support the budget.
We request Parliament to support the budget vote 14 of Statistics South Africa. Honorable members, it is important to support this budget vote because we are navigating a path in a world that is undergoing rapid and profound changes. And this is equally true in the realm of statistics. Investing in and promoting this vital pillar of our national life. Official statistics are not just tools. They are public goods.
Meanwhile, Deputy Minister Nomcebo Mhlauli noted some challenges facing the department.
The department continues to face significant vacancy pressures due to physical constraint. Honorable members, the committee have raised several key concerns and its deliberations. Firstly, the high vacancy rate, the loss of skilled personnel to various domestic and international organizations. Urge the department to have a timely process of filling executive management and specialist vacancies. Secondly, the committee is concerned about the department's inability to meet equity targets, particularly regarding the representation of persons with disabilities and women in senior level roles. This is not only a compliance issue, but also a transformative imperative aligned with the NDP's goals. Thirdly, the committee noted the department's shortfall of approximately 300 million, which hinders its ability to fully implement its strategic priorities.
The budget debate is scheduled to take place later this evening. For Channel Africa News, I am Innocent Samosa in Johannesburg.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Now, as South Africa observes National Savings Month this July, the spotlight falls on the urgent need to strengthen financial literacy. Encouragingly, though, there are signs of progress. Fintech platform Pay Me Now, which is a pioneer in earned wages access, reports that its users have completed over 2.5 million financial education modules. And this reflects a growing appetite amongst South Africans, particularly low-income earners, for better financial understanding. But while this hunger for financial knowledge is clear, access to quality education remains uneven. Studies continue to show that financial literacy levels are worryingly low, especially amongst women, young people, and those without formal qualifications. Well, to unpack some of these trends and the role of technology in bridging the gap, we're now joined by Denise Neertling, who's the head of marketing at Pay Me Now. Denise, thanks very much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Thanks to you, Peter. It's an honor to be here with you guys and, like you say, to chat about this amazing statistic about our people doing financial education modules and improving their literacy as we kick off Savings Month.
So tell me about why you think that there's this surge in financial literacy, and what are they actually looking for and wanting to learn?
You know, Peter, I think it is like you mentioned, it's such a great statistic to see people improving their financial literacy and wanting to learn how to manage their money better. I think the surge in that we've seen in people wanting to finish or complete financial education modules shows that they are eager to learn how to build better financial futures. They want to gain control. They want to learn how to save and how to better manage their money. And the fact that we see that in South Africa, the household saving rate is at negative 1% is not a sign of people not wanting to save. It might be more a sign of people not having the knowledge or the tools on how to do it. So I think the surge is because the accessibility is there. We're very proud of the fact that on Pay Me Now, we can offer this financial literacy modules free of charge to our users, because it is such an important part in knowing how to manage your money. If you know how to manage your money, how to budget, how to spend your money wisely, you are able to make better informed decisions. So I think it is that desire to want to empower yourself, which is such a great sign. We're moving in the right direction, that we're seeing the surge on Pay Me Now, with people wanting to improve their financial literacy. And like you mentioned, it's interesting to see what modules are the forerunners in the sense of what they're completing. So we're seeing at the very, very forefront of the modules being completed is credit score modules. So modules about understanding and improving your credit score, which also is an amazing sign, because improving your credit score or having a good credit score really enables you to make better and more informed financial decisions. It can even have an impact on you getting a job, because most employers do credit checks before they hire people, or even when you apply for a home loan, or when you want to get a rental contract. These are all things that's going to improve your life, ultimately, because it affects so many other areas. We also see people improving their basic financial skills. That's the second module that's been completed the most, which signifies the desire to build a strong financial foundation. People are wanting to do basic financial skills. It's amazing to see that they're building healthy habits from the get-go up to really improve their financial futures and making better decisions that ultimately will help them to save more money as they're spending more wisely.
So the first one is quite telling, though, isn't it, about the credit score? Because the other way of looking at it, for me, it suggests we've got people with credit score issues, which means they're overburdened and can't save. Is that part of the story that it's telling us?
Yes, it can be very much the part of the story. There's many aspects of this narrative, many aspects of the story that can show as to why people are doing it. On Pay Me Now, we're grateful that we're giving the people the ability to also do their credit score every 45 days. So through being able to do it, you now get eyes on it and have, again, being able to see something, you can now start taking action as to how you're going to be improving it. So yes, it might be a sign that too many people are overburdened in that sense. But we have also seen a study was done by JP Morgan, which we were also part of, which shows that when we compared a group of people that have access to a platform or innovative solution like earned wage access compared to a same group of, or another group of people who didn't have access to it, we saw a clear improvement on the credit scores of those having access to tools like earned wage access, or platforms like earned wage access platforms that help them manage their money better to get out of debt and go into more healthier habits. So yes, it might be the reason, but at least knowing that they are doing it, knowing that now they've got access to such a platform, means they are kickstarting their journey to improving it. So whatever the start might be, we know that they're moving in the right direction, which I'm going to take that as a positive and focus on that.
All right. So credit scores improving perhaps is one sign that this education is helping. Have you seen any other indicators that a little bit of education can make a difference in people's lives?
Definitely. You know what, when we look at our stats on Pay Me Now, especially when we look at the people that's done the most financial educations, we can also see that they are making better money choices. On our platform, you basically have either the option for doing or access to your earned wages, or another one of our features that we're very proud of is our value-added services in the forms of vouchers for necessity items. Now, these vouchers for necessity items are like groceries and electricity, data, school supplies, these kinds of things. And we've seen people that's done more financial education modules are making the better decision of, instead of cashing out or getting access to their wages, they're using it to buy vouchers, which come at no fees. So already they've made that mind shift to know that if I need the money for groceries, rather buy a voucher, and then I'm going to save on those fees. So definitely we've seen a shift in the amount of people buying vouchers as opposed to people doing cash outs. We've also seen the amount of people with earned wage access, you get access to a certain amount. Usually it's between 20 and 25% access to your earned wages during the course of the month. However, most of our users are only using around 14% of their earned wages during the course of the month, meaning once again, we've changed their mindset. They're thinking differently about money earned as opposed to money borrowed. So we've definitely seen an improvement in the way that people use the platform, access their money, and manage their spending once they've done their financial training modules.
Do you think financial education should be introduced much earlier in life? I mean, even primary school, I reckon.
Definitely. I think it's financial. Many people, I might be one of them, if you start talking finances, it can be daunting. It really can be daunting. And we see this also when we speak to people or speak to our users. It is really something because it's something that affects your livelihood. It's your money, your finances. But I do think we should definitely start introducing financial literacy at a younger age. It can be done in a fun way. When we look at the way that we do it, we've gamified it. So if you can do it in a way that people want to receive it, then they will take in the information. And if we really are serious about improving our savings culture in South Africa, then we need to ensure that people have access to financial literacy. Not just at an older age or once they go studying or at work when they've got access to a platform like this, but for a much younger age. We can definitely introduce it, like you say, even from primary school. Make it a fun way to learn how to manage money. It's going to help them in every aspect of their life. And like I said earlier, help them build a healthy foundation. And from there, you build up stronger and stronger and not have to later in your life having to, climb out of a pool of debt or try and pull yourself out of a very, very dire situation. So I agree with you 100%. Yeah. We have to introduce it very, very a lot earlier.
Denise, we're going to have to leave it there for the time being, but thank you so much indeed for talking to us. How do people get onto this site and start their education?
Thanks to you, Peter. It's always lovely chatting to you guys, and we're excited about Savings Month. And if there's someone listening and you want to, join the savings revolution and the financial education revolution that we are so proud of and driving, they can either go to, we've got a LinkedIn page, Pay Me Now group. They can also send an email, info@PayMeNow, or just reach out to me, Denise at paymenow.app, or obviously at our website, www.paymenow.app. So go on there, go and have a look, see what we do, and let's all support this Savings Month. It's such a great month to be improving financial literacy and boosting savings.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Denise. Have a good day.
Thanks, Peter. Have a good day.
That's Denise Neertling, Head of Marketing at Pay Me Now. Financial education, critical, helping us engender this culture of savings. Asanda.
Right, we enter the third and final hour of Rise and Shine now on this Thursday. It's the 3rd of July. It's 8 o'clock Central African time. A good morning if you've just joined us. For staying with us, we say thank you. And in this hour, we'll be looking at the South African Human Rights Commission having expressed concern at reports that some healthcare facilities are denying treatment to individuals on the basis of nationality or documentation. That story and more coming up in this hour. It's 8 o'clock, as I said. Let's check in with the news with Oned Nzinzi. After her will be Musibudi Makura with sports headlines.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. The West Africa Democracy Solidarity Network has called for action amid rising threats to democracy, peace and security across the region. From controversial constitutional changes in Togo to political tensions in Cote d'Ivoire, Guinea and Ghana, concerns are mounting over shrinking democratic space and weakening institutions. Austin Naigbe from Wademos explains.
The Sahel region, particularly on the best northern Nigeria, Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali was worst hit at a time, but gradually is moving towards Senegal, which usually was a very peaceful location. ECOWAS standby force, which is supposed to play a huge role in coordinating action to ward off those insurgency groups, they had argued that ECOWAS refused to come to their aid when they had security challenge. The crisis in the Sahel continue unabated. The military regime who came to power riding on the insecurity in their own country and of course in the region is not able to deal with insecurity.
A fourth person has been added to the case of 4 individuals arrested in connection with the 2021 July unrest in South Africa. The 5 are alleged to have posted inciting messages in a WhatsApp chat group named Zuma Real Activist 100%. Authorities believe their messages contributed to the public violence and looting of the retail stores in the Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal provinces at the time. The unrest was to protest against the arrest of the former President Jacob Zuma. The accused appeared briefly at the Roodepoort Magistrate Court in Johannesburg. They face charges of conspiracy to commit public violence and 2 counts of incitement to commit public violence. One of the accused, Buhari Mashipa, is a member of Zuma's MK party. She insists that she is innocent.
I feel that there's a lot of injustice that is going on when the public violence that I'm accused of started. I was at work. I am a nurse by profession. Even if they want, they can go and check my register. I have signed in and out of work. So I do not know why am I charged of something that I did not do. I know nothing of this. Maybe my sin is that I am a fan of my president, Jacob Zuma.
The bail application of 12 South African National Defence Force Special Task Force members is expected to resume at the Randburg Magistrate Court in Johannesburg this morning. The group is facing charges related to the 2023 murder of Hawk Specialist Investigator Lieutenant Colonel Franz Matiba. They are also facing charges relating to the kidnapping and disappearance of Ethiopian national and alleged ISIS leader Abdallah Abadiga in December 2022. Matiba was reportedly investigating the disappearance of Abadiga when he was gunned down in August 2023. He was shot while driving on the N1 near the Hammanskraal off-ramp. The South African Human Rights Commission has warned that if foreign nationals are continuously denied access to healthcare in South Africa, illnesses such as TB and HIV will remain a major concern. The remarks come amid reports suggesting that certain healthcare facilities in the country deny treatment to individuals on the basis of nationality or documentation status. The Commission says this is not only unethical and unlawful, but also inconsistent with the country's obligation under both domestic and international human rights laws. The SAHRC Commissioner Sandra Mokwasha has identified systematic failures as the biggest contributor to this dilemma.
Should we not address and provide medical health care to everyone? Issues such as HIV will not be addressed, and TB, which are the most problematic issues in South Africa. So we will see an increase in that. And the issue is then we really need all governments, and specifically in the SADC region, to have a conversation about access to healthcare in South Africa and how do we then navigate and answer that so that we don't have vulnerable members of the community battling it out for limited resources at hospitals.
And lastly, UN officials say armed gangs have further tightened their grip on Haiti despite efforts by police and a Kenya-led international force. The Assistant Secretary General of the Americas, Miroslav Jenka, said Haiti's capital, Port-au-Prince, was paralyzed and isolated. He highlighted a surge in human rights violations, including sexual violence and allegations of people trafficking for their internal organs. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Ntsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, having undergone extensive renovations, the Kenya's Kasarani Stadium is ready to host matches in the upcoming African Nations Championship tournament. And then Emma Raducanu produced one of the best displays in recent times to see beside 2023 champion Marketa Vondrousova and reach the third round at Wimbledon. Details at 8:30.
Are you fluent in French, Chinyanja, Portuguese, and Kiswahili? Are you passionate about radio? And are you looking to work in South Africa? Do you have papers that qualify you to work in South Africa? In that case, we might have an opportunity for you to work for Channel Africa. Send us your CV and demo at newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Remember, if you don't hear from us within 14 days, it means you have not made it or you have not been selected. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Call us on +27 63 406 9126. And contribute to the conversation. Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
All right, let's get into this story now, where the South African Human Rights Commission, or the SAHRC, has expressed concern at reports that some healthcare facilities are denying treatment to individuals on the basis of nationality or documentation status. The Commission says it is illegal and unethical to prevent undocumented foreign nationals from accessing medical healthcare facilities. We now speak to South African Human Rights Commissioner Sandra Magwasha. Sandra, thank you for joining us. How are you this Thursday morning?
I'm well, and yourself. Thank you for inviting the Commission.
Our pleasure. What triggered your concerns on this issue as the SAHRC?
What triggered the Human Rights Commission into issuing out the statement is the ongoing media coverage of persons being denied access to healthcare by civic society and the medical practitioners that are working there, but also the fact that we have received several complaints from those who have been denied access to healthcare.
The Constitution guarantees the right to access healthcare, but does that right also mean the right to receive free of charge this healthcare? Because that is the biggest contention, that non-South Africans pay for services.
And in terms of, I may be corrected, but the law specifically says, in terms of Section 27, everyone has the right to access to healthcare service, including reproductive rights, and then expands on that. And there's certain services that those who use it are then entitled to pay, whether you're a South African or non-South African. So there is provision for the payment of those services, and as the Commission, we are unable to speculate whether non-nationals are not paying for those services. It would be unfair to do so.
When we say that all people in South Africa, regardless of nationality, are entitled to basic healthcare, who is included on the list?
This includes refugees, asylum seekers, documented and undocumented migrants, stateless persons, children who are separated and unaccompanied, stateless children, persons in detention, and vulnerable persons such as persons with disabilities, older persons, and persons living in poverty. So you can imagine that is a vast number of South Africans and those living in the South African borders.
Yeah. Let's look at, besides the country's constitution, but what are South Africa's obligations on both the regional and international human rights laws?
So we've signed it's the Constitution, it's the National Health Act, but there's several treaties that we have signed in terms of the universal access to healthcare, in terms of the region, but also internationally. So we have treaties that obligate South Africa to provide emergency healthcare services, but also access to healthcare to certain people.
When one looks at the state of our healthcare system currently, it faces significant challenges, including underfunding, staff shortages, and inadequate infrastructure. It's overburdened. And some say it's due to the provision of services to non-South Africans. How would you answer to this?
It's incorrect to blame the systematic challenges on a specific vulnerable group instead of saying these systematic challenges stem from a lack of adequate budget allocated to the Department of Health, therefore resulting in these systematic challenges you've mentioned.
You face criticism as a commission from some about serving interests of non-South Africans, while many South Africans are dealing with adverse challenges relating to poverty and lack of access to basic services. How would you clarify your role as the SAHRC to remove any misunderstandings?
The role of the Human Rights Commission stems from the constitutional mandate that we were given. So we will adhere to that mandate without fear or prejudice. But to add on to that, we have done so much in terms of poverty alleviation for South Africans. And most of the time when we get public scrutiny and focus is simply because we are dealing with controversial issues, which then allow people to then say, look at what the Commission is doing. They're not focusing on issues of South Africans, but we are on a daily basis. But however, we still have, as a Chapter 9 institution, you'll note that we have budgetary constraints, which then limit where we can be and how visible we want to be. But we are, as the Commission, working to ensure that in terms of human rights violations, we are at the center of it and reminding South Africans of our constitutional mandate.
As a commission, how will you continue with your monitoring work when it comes to this specific topic, and what are your plans in terms of engaging healthcare facilities, the relevant stakeholders within this space, like MECs, government officials, and the likes?
For example, in the last week of June, I was in Limpopo doing a monitoring. I met with the MEC of Health regarding the Tshilidzi Hospital, which I stated I gave it a 4 out of 10 in terms of the observance of human rights. But in terms of what we're doing nationally, we are monitoring hospitals. We are then writing letters to MECs asking them for action plans. We are engaging with the Minister of Health when it comes to issues that are very important. But we've noted that in terms of how to deal with the systematic issues, it is one, progressive realization. It is also noting that the importance of the National Health Insurance Act, which may then alleviate these systematic issues that we're raising.
How do you encourage then the undocumented foreign nationals who have fallen victim to being denied health access in different cases, and those who might in future not know what their rights are, in terms of where do they go for assistance?
Should anyone be denied access to healthcare, they may lay a complaint at the Human Rights Commission's offices, but also then call upon the respective lay a complaint with the health ombuds to ensure that they be provided with the necessary support.
Further engagements moving forward, what is the Commission looking to do to tackle this issue?
In terms of tackling the specific issue, we are waiting for the judgment in terms of the Kopanang Africa, apologies. We made oral submissions there. We are waiting for that judgment. But we also want to remind South Africans to respect the rule of law, to call the Department of Home Affairs where necessary, to call the South African Police Service where necessary, so they can do the work and not take the law upon themselves.
Right. Let's leave it there for now. Thanks, Sandra, for your time.
Thank you.
Sandra Makwasha is South African Human Rights Commissioner, talking about a report that they've recently looked into, or concerns they've raised as far as reports that some healthcare facilities are denying treatment to individuals on the basis of nationality or documentation status.
Annika Longi sur Channel Africa.
Nous allons à présent dérouler notre tapis rouge pour accueillir notre personnalité du jour, l'artiste chanteur Sheki Frey, qui est en ligne de Guinée avec nous.
Je suis un artiste guinéen, un créateur, un styliste, et je fais un peu ce qui plaît à mes fans. Voilà, c'est un peu ça. On a beaucoup de genres de trucs à faire, mais bon, pour le moment, on est basé un peu sur le rap.
D'accord. À quelle période de votre vie avez-vous commencé à vous intéresser à la musique, Sheki?
Bon, je crois pas qu'il y ait une période, parce que moi, je suis un mélomane depuis mon petit âge.
Annika Longi, tous les dimanches sur Mix Vibration.
Zochitika ndimo dapiri
kamlondola wazochitika pena paliponse.
Unduna wa zamalonda kumalawi waletsa kampani yopanga shuga ya Ilovo yomwe ndi nthambi ya Ilovo Sugar Group Limited kuti isiye kutumiza shuga kumaiko akunja. Malingana ndi nduna ya zamalonda Vitumbuko Mumba, izi zithandiza kuti shuga yemwe yakusowa pamsika azipezeka. Ndiye pano ndili ndi George Muhangu amene ali mu mzinda wa Blantyre mu dziko la Malawi. Chimene chikupangitsa kuti shuga azisowa ndi chani?
Chomwe chikupangitsa kuti shuga azisowa ndichonena kuti panopo ili ngati off season ya makampani a Ilovo Sugar Malawi, kunena kuti sakutha kupanga shugayi okwanira chifukwa akukolola. Ndiye akamaliza kukolola pameneno atayambeno sopano kugaya shugayi kuti azipezeka. Chinanso ndichonena kuti ma distributors amene akumakagula shuga kaya ndi ku Ilovo kaya ndi kusalima shuga akumagulisa ku maiko akunja ngati Zambia, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, Mozambique.
Zochitika ndi madaphiri lolemba mpaka lachisanu pa nthawi ya 7 koloko kufikira 8 koloko madzulo pa Channel Africa.
From Cape to Cairo, Dakar to Dar es Salaam, rise and shine with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda on Channel Africa. Wake up to the essence of the continent. Rise and shine on Channel Africa.
Continuing with that topic, we discuss it further and speak to Professor Alex van den Heever, who is chair in the field of Social Security Systems Administration and Management Studies. Professor van den Heever, thanks for making time for us on this Thursday morning. How are you?
Good morning. No, I'm fine.
The Human Rights Commission is worried that foreign nationals are being prevented from accessing healthcare in the country, in South Africa. What is your take on this concern and what the reports are saying, allegedly?
Well, I think that the reports, I've read through the statement and I agree with it fully. Firstly, there is the issue of what is stated in the Constitution. It makes no distinction between citizens and non-citizens. But it is important to ensure that that the public health system properly regulates how the public health system is reimbursed for foreign patients making use of the public sector. And I just want to make it very clear, I've been part of the discussions on health reform for 30 years, and this was raised 30 years ago. And the problem has been that national government has done absolutely nothing to establish a reimbursement mechanism for patients from the region making use of the South African public health system. And that is essentially what is required. You don't transfer the risk of the failure to do that to the patients at point of service. And having essentially a group of people who have no business regulating the behavior of people at public hospitals, going and stopping them from using these services, that is unethical and wrong. But it is a responsibility of government to make sure that the system isn't overburdened as a consequence, but managing that situation in a fair and reasonable manner. And that's where government has basically failed.
What does the law say about healthcare and undocumented foreign nationals in South Africa?
Well, the law doesn't prevent access because essentially there is no proper, there's no framework that prohibits them from using the public system. And the Constitution refers to essentially persons, anybody that is somebody in South Africa can't really be denied access to healthcare facilities. They have the same, there's sort of equal rights for everybody to access healthcare. But the issue is that you have to make sure that you run the service properly and responsibly without being discriminatory or unfair to people. So this is the problem, is now how do you do that? But what you don't do is have people standing in military uniforms outside hospitals and threatening them for using the public health system. First of all, you're not necessarily discriminating between people who should or shouldn't be using the service, and secondly, that there are actually more reasonable means of making sure that the system is not overburdened, and those reasonable means have not been used.
You say this is an issue that arose about 30 years ago. So when we're talking about the list of who are we referring to when we say that all people in South Africa, regardless of nationality, are entitled to basic healthcare, has that list changed and added more, or it's remained the same?
No, it's essentially remained the same. Once South Africa has the right to differentiate users on a fair and reasonable basis to make sure that the system is properly available to South African citizens and permanent residents, and non-permanent residents also with rights to be in South Africa. It does have that right to do so, but the way in which it differentiates between those particular people must be fair and reasonable, and that is a requirement on the Constitution. The problem is, when I say 30 years, it means right in 1994, it was understood that South Africa is always going to face a risk of people coming and crossing the borders and using South African healthcare services, and there must be a mechanism for making sure that there is intergovernmental payment for that. So that is the arrangement that should have been implemented. Now, that's 30 years on, absolutely nothing has been done. So what you do is, we're part of SADC, we're part of regional agreements and treaties, we're part of a customs union, we pay into that customs union. Parts of that money should be offset for patients from the region using our services, and that is fair and reasonable. But you don't transfer that burden to the patients, the people who need healthcare at point of service. And it is entirely, there are so many reasonable ways of setting up that arrangement, but to have done nothing in 30 years is unacceptable. And then to blame people at point of service, people are going to try and, it's important for them to make sure that they get access to healthcare. That is a reasonable expectation of people who are in need. Yeah. What government must do is make sure that access is fair and reasonable, and what you want to do is to make sure that the overall system is generally open and fair to everybody, that you don't have funny rules and things that apply at point of service. Minimize those so that people can just walk in and get treatment. Compensation is something you sort out at a higher level.
You mentioned South Africa having accountability to SADC treaties and the like. So besides our country's constitution, what are South Africa's obligations on both the regional and international human rights laws, and who is monitoring whether or not we are fitting or sticking to these?
Well, the sort of the regional agreements don't really address this. The SADC arrangements are to do with the customs union. And South Africa essentially pays into that customs union. So the customs union deals with imports and tariffs, so that there's uniformity around all of the countries in the region. Otherwise, you're going to have all sorts of sort of risk transfers within the region, trying to take advantage of different tariff levels. So the customs union is an agreement within the region which allows for intercountry transfers of what is essentially tax revenues. Mm-hmm. And that is potentially an indication of the kind of agreement that's required when you're dealing with people crossing borders to use healthcare services. But it's important to note that provincial hospitals have not implemented billing systems, etc., to be able to say, well, this was a Zimbabwean citizen. Here's the bill. Here's how much they costed. They don't do that. And so you actually don't have anything to take to Zimbabwe to say, pay for this patient. Now, what you want to do is to make sure that there is a system in place that allows for an invoice to be developed for everybody using the service. People have a right to use these services for free. Mm. So it's zeroed as a charge for the individual using the service. But that account allows you to go to somebody else who might be a payer, whether it's a medical scheme, a social insurance fund, or a foreign country, and to say, here's the invoice for this particular individual. Now, these systems have to be negotiated and set up, and it's to allow for these transfers to occur. But what you want to do is to manage the risk to South Africa of cross-border flows of people to use healthcare services, which is inevitable. It's a risk you have to manage. You're not going to stop it. You have to manage it. And the problem has been that nobody's managed it.
What role can law enforcement play in this, and can they intervene to ensure proper conduct within our health systems?
Well, law enforcement should be protecting people from being abused at point of service. So if there is somebody who's barring somebody from accessing a healthcare service because for any reason, law enforcement should be turned on those people. Where you've got foreign nationals using public healthcare services, the way in which you manage that isn't through law enforcement. It's through setting up a proper system to ensure that there is a payment in respect of those individuals that doesn't come from that individual. So foreign countries can pay, and they should pay. But South Africa has a responsibility to set up that regime and also to negotiate it into existence. But the perpetual gripe that there are foreign patients burdening the public healthcare system is an indication of public system failure. They needed to set up the systems so that that isn't a burden on the South African healthcare system. But to sit and do nothing is wrong. So law enforcement is not the route to protect the health system. That law enforcement is there to protect the patients from inappropriate behavior and misconduct of other members of society or unfair discrimination. But the overall arrangement to protect the integrity of the public healthcare system is the responsibility of the government. And unfortunately, they have been AWOL for a considerable period of time in sorting out this problem.
How should we continue then the monitoring roles of bodies such as the South African Human Rights Commission and other NGOs or civil society groups in terms of checking what's going on? And are they even listened to when they raise the alarm or raise concerns, these monitoring bodies? What should we do to continue from here on out?
Well, I think that what the Human Rights Commission has done is really important. So although it doesn't have any direct explicit effect, it makes the issue known and it doesn't give moral support to inappropriate behavior. It doesn't provide any moral backing to the people who are attacking vulnerable individuals. That's important. I think that sentiment in itself is very important. I think the fact that we're discussing this matter now shows how important the Human Rights Commission's public statements are. And it's right, they are part of overseeing the South African Constitution. Now, the responsibility for giving effect to the South African Constitution, a large part of that obligation falls on government. And what they're actually making very clear is there's a deficit here. Government is actually not dealing with this matter in a responsible manner. But there is no way in which you can provide any moral backing to the attacking of vulnerable people or shifting the burden onto vulnerable people to deal with a problem that government itself is organized and has a legitimate role in resolving in a fair and reasonable manner consistent with the Constitution and the constitutional principles.
Professor van den Heever, thank you so much again for your time, and we appreciate it.
No, my pleasure.
Professor Alex van den Heever is Chair in the field of Social Security Systems Administration and Management Studies, unpacking these concerns raised by the South African Human Rights Commission, or the SAHRC, that there are reports that some healthcare facilities are denying health treatment to individuals on the basis of nationality or documentation status. We're going to get news headlines in just a bit, but it is Thursday. It's the 3rd of July on this particular day, and if it's your birthday, we say happy birthday to you. Some famous people that you share this day with in terms of birthday. Bankole Timothy, who is a Sierra Leonean journalist, born in 1923. Bobby Skinstad is also a famous person whose birthday it is today. He's a South African rugby player, born in Bulawayo, Zimbabwe, in 1976. Also, Tom Cruise, American actor, was born on this day in 1962. Share a birthday with him. He's turning 63 years old. I had no idea he was already in his 60s. But anyway, he's looking very fit. Julian Assange, founder of WikiLeaks, was also born on this day in Queensland, Australia in 1971. You also share a birthday with Roland Schoeman, South African multiple Olympic gold-winning swimmer, born on this day in 1980. 8:30 Central African time it is. Let's say good morning to Onel Nsinzi for news headlines.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Former Gabonese President Ali Bongo Ondimba has appeared before 2 investigative judges in Paris this week. This is part of a legal process he initiated following allegations of torture, abduction and detention by an organized group. South Africa's Department of Health has condemned actions of groups blocking access to healthcare facilities to deny treatment to patients who they say are undocumented foreign nationals. And the UN officials say armed gangs have further tightened their grip on Haiti despite efforts of police and a Kenya international-led force. Channel Africa News, I am Onele Ntsintsi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
It's time to catch you up with the world of sport. Here's Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning once again from the Sports Desk. Now, former Football Association of Zambia president, that is Kalusha Bwalia, has been appointed the vice chairperson of the Zambian Football Association National Team Technical Subcommittee. Kalusha, regarded as one of Zambia's finest footballer, brings a wealth of experience both on and off the pitch. Meanwhile, other legends of the game appointed to the National Team Technical Committee include Kenneth Malitoli, veteran coach Danny Kabwe, as well as a former national soccer team coach Patrick Piri. The committee is expected to provide key technical advice as well as oversight for the development as well as the performance of Zambia's national football teams. Onto this now, with eyes on the continent fixed on East Africa, Kenya has made a bold statement of intent by officially handing over the refurbished Kasarani Stadium to the local organizing committees ahead of the 2024 Total Energies African Nations Championship Chan tournament. So the stadium, which has undergone extensive renovations, will not only serve as Kenya's primary venue but also host the final match of the competition on the 30th of August. The symbolic handover was conducted by Kenya's Cabinet Secretary for Sports, Salim Mvura, who said the move marked a critical milestone in the country's journey towards hosting the 8th edition of the Chan tournament. Now, the Moi International Sports Centre, popularly known as Kasarani, will host all Group A games involving the host nation Kenya, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Morocco, Angola, as well as Zambia. Harambee Stars, under coach the South African coach Benny McCarthy, will begin their campaign at the same venue against the Democratic Republic of Congo on Sunday, the 3rd of August. Now, the Chan tournament will be co-hosted by Kenya, Uganda, as well as Tanzania, running from the 2nd until the 30th of August. Meanwhile, Tanzania's Benjamin Mkapa Stadium in Dar es Salaam will host the opening match between the Taifa Stars as well as Burkina Faso, while Uganda's Nelson Mandela Stadium in Kampala will stage key fixtures for Group C. The Nyayo National Stadium in Nairobi, which will host several Group A fixtures including Morocco versus Angola, was also given a positive readiness update. Meanwhile, Zanzibar will also host a number of matches at this year's competition. The new Amam Stadium, which recently hosted the CAF Confederation Cup final, will also stage Group D matches featuring Senegal, Congo, Sudan, as well as Nigeria. With the venues now secured, stadiums upgraded, the countdown has officially begun. East Africa is now poised to deliver a historic Chan tournament that promises more for African football fans. For the field now, former Bayern Munich winger Leroy Sané expects the German Giants to hold their own against PSG in the quarterfinal of the FIFA Club World Cup when the two teams clash this coming Saturday. Sané made his comments just before he left the Bayern camp to complete his move to Galatasaray in the Turkish Super League, having spent 5 years in the Bundesliga under various coaches. Bayern thrashed Flamengo 4-2 at the Hard Rock Stadium in Miami, Florida, to book their spot in the last 8. Sané is confident that they can beat the current European champions in the hope that Bayern can lift the title in the USA.
I think in football, so it doesn't matter at the end. You always want to play against the best team, always one of the best teams. I think this is where the pressure comes. We are all excited about it. No matter who's the opponent, we're looking forward to it and go step by step.
On to tennis news now. British number 1 Emma Raducanu produced one of the best displays in recent times. This to sweep aside 2023 champion Marketa Vondrousova and reach the Wimbledon third round on Wednesday. In an outstanding performance marked by authority as well as intensity, the 22-year-old won that match 6-3 and 6-3 in just 82 minutes amid an electric atmosphere on centre court. It was also the level that the former US Open champion will need to replicate if she is to improve when she meets the world number 1, that is Aryna Sabalenka, in the next round for a place in the last round of 16. You'd remember, of course, Aryna Sabalenka having had a best run back in 2021 as well as 2024.
I mean, there were some points that I have no idea how I turned around. I think one for sure that I remember in the second set, but I knew playing Marketa, it was going to be an extremely difficult match. I mean, she's won this tournament and it's a huge, huge achievement. So she's also in form really well. So I'm just so happy with how I competed, put my game out on the court, and I was just really focused the whole way through.
It's 8:36 a.m. Central African time and concludes your sports news this morning on Africa Rise and Shine. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or give us a call. The newsroom line is +27 11714 4459. I'm back with more sports news in the next hour. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Mosibu D. Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Hello, Africa. We would love to hear your voice on our radio station. Be part of the fun and send a shout out or greeting message to your loved ones and your favorite Channel Africa presenters. Whether you're in Africa, the diaspora, or anywhere else around the globe, we want to hear your voice. Send your shout out message by sending an email to info@channelafrica.co.za or send them to our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages. Help us diversify our sound with your voice. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Let's get the latest from the world of business as Chandugo Ligeke gives us our economics news.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. U.S. President Donald Trump will host leaders from 5 African nations in Washington next week to discuss commercial opportunities. Trump will host leaders from Gabon, Guinea-Bissau, Liberia, Mauritania, and Senegal for a discussion and lunch at the White House on the 9th of July. The Trump administration has axed a number of U.S. foreign aid for Africa as part of a plan to curb spending it considers wasteful and not aligned with Trump's Africa-first policies. It says it wants to focus on trade and investment and to drive mutual prosperity. The Executive Board of the International Monetary Fund has approved the third review of Ethiopia's $3.4 billion loan program, unlocking access to $262.3 million in financing for the East African nation as the country continues debt restructuring talks. Ethiopia and IMF staff reached a staff-level agreement on the 30th of May, citing strong results from the first year of the program, which aims to stabilize Ethiopia's economy amid ongoing debt restructuring negotiations with official creditors and bondholders. The approval comes as Ethiopia and its official creditor committee, co-chaired by France and China, finalized a memorandum of understanding on debt restructuring. Kenya is planning to privatize some state assets via initial public offerings in order to bring in more private sector investment. This was mentioned by President William Ruto at the London Stock Exchange. The Kenyan government is planning to start with listing the Kenya Pipeline Company via an IPO on the Nairobi Securities Exchange this year. Jobuli Hodi has more.
President Ruto also says that well-functioning domestic capital markets could reduce reliance on external debt. Kenya has been seeking new sources of funding since deadly nationwide protests last summer forced it to pursue austerity measures and scrap planned tax hikes worth more than $2.68 billion. Separately, at the Africa Debate event yesterday, Ruto said that following shocks such as U.S. President Donald Trump's elimination of USAID this year, Kenya is working to rely on its own resources and private investments rather than resources the country does not have control over.
South Africa's youth unemployment crisis continues to deepen, with a staggering 62.4% of those aged 15 to 24 now without work. But amidst these grim figures, a story of hope is emerging from the private sector. Concentric South Africa is making a tangible difference through its skills development and leadership programs, transforming lives and offering a pathway to employment for hundreds of young South Africans. Director at Concentric South Africa, Jason Locke, says they have the ability to create positive business outcomes for the youth.
The youth of South Africa is absolutely brimming with potential. You know, Concentric is a great learning organisation. We've got the ability to help unlock that potential to create really positive business outcomes for our international. So getting great outcomes for the country in terms of one of the biggest challenges that it currently faces. Unlike traditional hiring strategies, our approach really focuses on providing opportunities for those from underrepresented communities. And what we're wanting to do there is remove the barriers to entry that they face.
Republican leaders in the U.S. Congress have delayed a vote on President Trump's tax and immigration bill as they scramble to overcome objections from members of their own party. The Big Beautiful Bill, as it's known, was passed by the Senate on Tuesday, but some Republicans in the House of Representatives are unhappy as it will add trillions to the national debt while cutting health care. The BBC's Peter Bowes has the details.
This is now a different bill to what was originally passed by the House. Some of the details have changed, and that's what some Republicans object to. And there are objections really on two main areas. The right of the party, the Conservatives in the Republican Party, object to the size of the spending, the fact that this bill is going to add several $1 trillion to the budget deficit in the United States. And those moderates in the Republican Party object to the cuts in healthcare spending in terms of health insurance, Medicaid.
$1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira, 532 in Botswana, 13 pula, 14. Kenya, the dollar is at 128 shilling 47. Zambia, 23 kwacha 96. BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is at 5 real 45. Russia, 78 ruble 72. India, 85 rupee 63. China, 7 yuan 16. South Africa, 17 rand 91 cents. $1 is at 73 pence to the British pound and 85 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is at $3,353, platinum at $1,399 per ounce, the price of Brent crude oil at $68.56 a barrel. That is all for now. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chandruko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Ahoy, matey!
Captain here to help, right, boys?
Set sail with us on a digital voyage like no other. Channel Africa has a treasure trove of awesomeness. That is our website and social media pages.
Tell me, why are you here?
We want you to be part of our adventure.
The winds are changing, Captain. And this time...
Imagine a world where curiosity knows no bounds, where entertainment meets enlightenment, and where every click leads to the African perspective. Visit us on our website, www.channelafrica.co.za, or follow us on Instagram or on X at Channel Africa 1. Go on, like us on Facebook at Channel Africa 1. So, spread the word. Tell a friend that Channel Africa's online variety is what they need on the web. Channel Africa, the African perspective. From Cape to Cairo, Dakar to Dar es Salaam, rise and shine with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda on Channel Africa.
8:45 Central African Time it is. The manufacturing sector in South Africa has continued to show signs of strain, and this is according to the APSA Purchasing Managers Index. The headline PMI remained in contractionary territory for the 8th consecutive month. The index, which measures the health of the sector, increased by 5.4 points to 48.5 index points in June. Although the reading is still in negative territory, below the 50-point mark, the gauge showed marginal improvement in June. Notando Makutulela has more.
That business activity declined in the same period, while sales orders increased due to recovering domestic demand, although export volumes remain near the lowest levels seen this year. APSA says the June PMI results suggest that South Africa's manufacturing sector may be turning a corner, with firmer demand and easing cost pressures laying the groundwork for recovery. However, output remains weak and structural logistical challenges persist.
The PMI did increase somewhat to 48.5 in June, regardless of the increase below that 50 neutral mark, which separates an expansion from a contraction. This is for now the 8th consecutive month, but we think that this is still encouraging, given that the PMI at the current level is at its second highest in 2025. So there's some improvement there as far as, manufacturing sentiment is concerned. And then if you look at the underlying data in terms of what led to sort of the increase that we saw in June, I think the biggest one was the new sales orders sub-index. So that rose by quite a bit to 46.1 in June. And I think that's a big signal that there's some recovery in demand. And I think most of that demand, increase is coming from the domestic environment.
The purchasing price index fell by 2.3 points to 58.1 due to a stronger rand and lower diesel prices at the start of June.
Continued to sort of ease in June, and I think that's a positive for the sector. And I think this is due to the rand being relatively stronger in June compared to May, and also we did also have those fuel price cuts coming in June. So I think that those are part of the things that led to continued deterioration in the price index. And then in terms of Brent crude oil prices, as much as they were higher in June compared to May, but I think the decline that you saw in diesel prices at the beginning of June likely helped that index.
APSA says the index tracking expected business conditions in 6 months' time was unchanged at 62.5, maintaining the highest level since the end of 2024. Notando Makutulela, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Wake up to the essence of the continent. Rise and shine on Channel Africa.
Now, the way we pay for things is changing, and it's changing fast. In Southern Africa, digital payments are on the rise, offering faster, safer, and more convenient ways for individuals and businesses to transact. From tap-and-go cards to mobile wallets and QR codes, technology is transforming access to financial services, but there are challenges, especially around trust, infrastructure, and inclusion. We speak now to Richard Kadiaka, who's Regional Managing Director for Southern Africa Network International. Let's start, Richard. As I say, good morning to you.
Morning to you, Peter, and morning to your listeners.
Let's start with how you would describe the current digital payments landscape in Southern Africa. I must admit, I was shocked the other day when I realized that I didn't have my card. It was going to take a couple of days for the card to come through, that they told me I could use my phone. And I'd seen people do this, but this is where we are now with technology.
Yeah, 100%, Peter. The digital payments landscape is probably at its highest inflection point right now, right? There's so much innovation. There's so much digitization. And I think markets are starting to realize that, the right payment experience coming in at the right price and speed is the right ingredient to enhancing economic performance. In markets like ours, we can actually truly drive modernization of the informal economy, drive to inclusion of the marginalized, right? So suddenly you have quite a number of different payment methods available to you versus the dependence on just the traditional card, right? If you had a mobile money wallet, you can do a quick transfer. If you had, your card not with you, as you rightly say, it could quickly be provisioned to your Apple Pay wallet, your Samsung Pay wallet, to even your Garmin that's in your hand, and it could quickly be used to pay for goods and services. And regionally, what we're seeing, in markets like Namibia, the now launch of their instant payments capability. 2 years ago, Angola also came in with instant transfers focused on mobile money and accounts, and our own PayShap here in South Africa. So we're seeing more and more ways to pay being made available to consumers, and therefore making it easier, to facilitate transactions wherever you are.
What do you think is driving this shift? Is it consumer demand? I know for sure COVID-19 changed it for me, because I had to find solutions to buy products, get them delivered. And I've never really gone back to my old ways.
Absolutely. Yeah. COVID-19 created the opportunity, and it allowed for extreme innovation from grocery deliveries, food deliveries, and non-contact transactions, which meant e-commerce could take off in ways you've never seen before. But also the fact that we're now more and more growing into a digital savvy economy or generation. Individuals are holding phones wherever they go. And through that, you could now facilitate payments either online or in-store using contact at any point. And I think both those points where we've realized how quickly life could be disrupted, especially life as we know it, has driven the innovation of stop anywhere for anything you need at any time, but also the fact that we are now digitally savvy, we're now looking for more and more ways to bring payments to the device and no longer looking for external form factors like cards.
I suppose trust remains a challenge, especially if you've been used to getting cash in hand, and maybe even if you didn't have a bank account, you put the cash under your mattress or somewhere. That to transition to this digital space where you don't see the cash, for some people it's quite a jump still.
It is. And there's still quite a lot of education that's required. Right? We saw when originally the ability to tap and pay with your phone came in, there was quite a lot of skepticism. And now the ability to accept payments with phone is at an emerging level. And we're still now seeing again that very same skepticism of, can I trust that by tapping my card on your phone, by tapping my phone on your phone, the transaction has happened, but I'm not now at risk of leaving my details on your phone and not being compromised. And we've seen now that there's a lot of investment from bad actors, from individuals looking to take advantage of the payment ecosystem, fraud and otherwise, that we now actually have to up our game in protecting the ecosystem, in giving customers availability and predictability of experience and service outcomes. There's a lot of work that payment providers, the payment enablers like ourselves are putting in complying with the highest in data security standards, the highest in data management, the highest in encrypting point-to-point, such that transaction data cannot be compromised. But a lot of work still remains with the consumer to be vigilant, to be aware, to also understand where they are at risk of being compromised. Social engineering, incorrect mentioned websites, sharing your details in the incorrect environment, i.e. via SMS or email, which all of those could leave you exposed outside of where institutions like ourselves and banks could protect you. So it requires quite a bit of effort from us, but also the consumers to be aware and remain vigilant.
All right, we run out of time, but in 30 seconds, do you think cash is on its way out?
I think we're still going to see cash in the way. I mean, it's keeping its calm, but work is underway to make it less critical, right? The more we gain in ubiquitous acceptance of all of these alternative payment methods that you mentioned, the more we are likely to see less and less transactions depending on cash, right? And I think the price at which these payments are made available is also a driving factor. So the more affordable they become, the less dependent we will be on cash. But I think we will see it around for the next 5 to 10 years.
Richard, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I'm of the old generation, and people don't even know what it was like to write a check back in the day. But there you have it. Thanks so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, Peter.
That's Richard Kadiaka, Regional Managing Director for Southern Africa Network International, talking to us about the fast developing digital payments platforms. Right, coming up after the 9 o'clock news, we have On the Move with Palisa and Benjamin. And Palisa is in studio to tell us what's coming up shortly. Palisa, did you ever write a check in your life, or you...
Can I tell you a story?
You're the tail end of it. Yeah.
So, in the real sense, no, I've never written a check.
Wow.
But I remember I was always so curious about the check and the checkbook.
Yeah.
So when I was younger, I went through my dad's wallet. I found his checkbook and I took one out and I wrote in it. And I thought I could just go to the bank and get some money. So I have written in a check, but I never got any money from it.
That's fantastic.
All right, so today on The Move, in the first hour of the show, I don't know if you guys have been to the Gau train station, which is, Johannesburg speed train. The seats there are very uncomfortable. Yeah. But there's a reason why they are uncomfortable, because of a term called hostile architecture. It's also known as defensive or exclusionary design, that refers to urban designs that actually stop the homeless from sleeping or being in those spaces.
Wow.
So we're going to be speaking about hostile architecture because it is on the rise here in African cities, even though it's mostly a Western phenomenon. So now cities like Johannesburg, Nairobi, Lagos, Cape Town have a lot of hostile architecture. We're going to be unpacking this further with Stephen Underwood, Communications and Fundraising Officer at U-Turn Homeless Ministry. So we're going to be finding out its impact on the homeless, but we're also going to be speaking about this phenomenon with Mpeti Marojele, owner and founder of Mpeti Marojele and Associates Architectural Studio. So that's going to be quite an interesting one.
Wow.
In today's Becoming feature, we have quite an interesting conversation to have about rites of passage. And we know a lot of African cultures have various rites of passage. But as more, the more modern we get and the more urban we get, we're finding actually very inclusive ways to still have those rites of passage. But it seems like we're moving further away from the cultural ones.
Yeah.
So we're going to be speaking to Professor Simphiwe Sesanti, a South African academic whose work intersects African philosophy, education, journalism, and cultural rights, to chat to us about this, as well as Gogo Nokanya Kumalo, a traditional healer, to speak to us about African rites of passage.
It's interesting, these rites of passages. I mean, the matric dance actually has become
is a rite of passage,
isn't it?
Correct.
And that's got its own thing.
Yes, yeah.
My goodness, wow.
That's
Okay.
what do you call hostile architecture?
Hostile architecture.
Hostile architecture. I wonder if that applies to bus stops as well.
Absolutely.
Because they're literally just concrete slabs now.
Yes.
You can't sit on that thing more than 5 minutes.
They used to be full benches and and with a hood over it, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes in the morning, especially if you're someone who's an early riser, you'd find maybe a homeless person sleeping on that bench there. Now they've changed it.
Wow.
That's also part of hostile architecture. So moving homeless people out of the inner
Instead
cities.
of dealing with
homelessness.
Challenge of homelessness.
Right,
Oh,
right.
Gosh. All right, so that's On the Move with Palisa and Benjamin coming up after the 9 o'clock news.
And from us, as the Rise and Shine duo, Asanda and Peter, we say goodbye for now. We'll journey tomorrow.
Aiwa tatenda shukuru tuonana mangwana makuseni. See you in the morning. Have a good day, everyone.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And we take a look at your top stories this hour. The former Gabonese President Ali Bongo testifies in Paris, and armed gangs tighten grip on Haiti. The latest news. Greetings to our listeners. The former Gabonese President Ali Bongo Ondimba appeared before 2 investigative judges in Paris this week as part of a legal process he initiated following allegations of torture, abduction and detention by an organized group. Ondimba complaints launched with full civil party status stems from events surrounding the military takeover that removed him from power in 2023. The French judiciary's involvement points to the growing international dimensions of the case, particularly given Bongo